Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's the Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
So, joining me tonight is Justin Oberholtzer of the Suit Up Metroplex podcast. How are
Yeah.
you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you for having me, and it's very appropriate that this is the episode that I'm on.
Yeah, right. Long story short, we were all meaning to get on the same episode together, and it turned out it's like, yeah, we got to just basically get on an episode that is towards the main theme he likes. It's like, we are going to basically, we're going to rank the best wrestlers who became movie stars or TV show stars.
Yes, and there's not. I mean, it's a short list, but it is also one when I did do the Suplex Multiplex podcast that there is more than you expect, especially when you start just including just pro wrestling even briefly being mentioned in movies. Of course, I'm terrible here. The name's slipping my mind, but there was a very early W.C. Fields comedy where, like, the subplot is him going to a professional wrestling match, and this is like late 20s, early 30s. So it's just very fascinating seeing, like, that's probably the earliest footage that we can actually see from that time period outside of the occasional clips here and there.
Absolutely. Even freaking, MMA fighters, we're going to include a few of them in here because, it's
Yes.
not first arts. We're also got, cage fighting and
And honestly, a lot of times they start to pass over into the wrestling world. Ronda Rousey, Cain Velasquez did.
there you go.
There's
And,
always going to be that connection.
at least every other superhero movie has at least one wrestler in it.
Yes.
Oh, man. So thank you for joining us. So I always let the guests go first because, what better way to start the show?
Okay, so how do you want to do it? You want me to just go who my favorites are, go down like a list?
Eh,
one to
no
five?
particular order, just
All right. Well, I am going to start off with probably the most influential, even if it's only in the States here, maybe through Mystery Science Theater 3000, but definitely El Santo as far as cultural impact. You could easily argue because he was an icon in Mexico. And while you could definitely debate the quality of those movies, and only some of them you're even going to get dubbing or subtitling, as somebody who always is tracking down those movies, especially when I was doing them on the Suplex Multiplex.
Right?
Got to roll the dice and just review some or watch some that you didn't really know what they were saying, but they were also simple enough movies. They're fighting bad guys or monsters.
To be an
You
El
really
Santo
didn't need the
versus
dialogue.
To be an El Santo versus the Vampire Woman. Come on.
Yes. And some of those are. I did one last year. I did like kind of a virtual, since we're in this pandemic world, a virtual like horathon, because I used to go to a 24-hour horathon every year in person in Philadelphia, and obviously not going to happen. So I just streamed some movies and had people on, and I stuck in a Santo movie at like 2 a.m. for a couple of us, and especially when you're in 2 a.m. watching El Santo, it was very fun. And that one
can't
was.
imagine.
I think it was just the state's title is just El Santo versus the Monsters, but that's basically he's facing like their version of like a Dr. Frankenstein mad scientist pulling out all these like almost Power Ranger style monsters, or that case more the Universal monsters, but they felt more like something you would have seen in Power Rangers a couple of decades later.
Right.
But
Even
it is
though-
something that we can kind of laugh at, but we do forget that, like, I can sit here and tell you, as far as box office goes, as a movie star, that is, we could probably say The Rock for recognizability, and even nowadays, Dave Bautista. Hulk Hogan is probably the most well-known professional wrestler. Didn't quite succeed, at least box office, well, I guess in both counts, to transition to movies, but...
I'll give him those TNT movies, but those were handled by some competent people who even they weren't even proud of it. So.
Yes. But there's just the cultural impact that El Santo had in Mexico in those films, which were big hits there.
Even appeared in the Batman cartoon, let alone Coco for Pixar. So, yeah, I mean, like you say,
I lost my mind when I was sitting in a theater, and I think I was the only person in that theater who recognized El Santo, or at least cared that El Santo.
Right.
Maybe some of the parents did, but they're like, yeah, whatever. But I'm just like, oh my God, it's El Santo.
Oh, man. On that same note, I'm glad you got me in the mood for that. I was going to mention him one way or the other. I got to bring up Tor Johnson.
Yes.
Time to go to bed.
Oh man, and I will tell you what, watching some of those movies he did with Ed Wood for the show, like they're always those kind of movies where there are definitely, like you just quoted, there's great moments, but there is, especially when you're watching them alone for a podcast to review, either with others or just by yourself, they can sometimes be brutal to get through. But there's something just endearing, just endearing though about Tor Johnson, and I do love that when Tim Burton made the Ed Wood film, that not only did he cast a professional wrestler, George the Animal Steel, to play Tor Johnson, which made sense, but it worked so well.
I didn't remember that, but that's awesome that he went that far. Just like, hey, I'm gonna recreate every one of his recurring modus operandi people, including that dude. So yeah, no, that is pretty awesome. I love how he went under many other derogatory names like the Swedish Angel or King Kong. It's like, good God.
Which I think the most excruciating, I believe, was the Beast of Yucca Flats for me, even though very funny. But man, is that a brutal one to get through. And that's one of the ones that's like, I don't even think it went past, I can look it up, but I don't think it went past 70 minutes. It might have only been like 62. But it's one of those movies, it's
so,
like,
I mean,
it might only be an hour, but it feels so much longer than some 3-hour movies I've sat, or 4-hour movies that I've sat through.
Right. Oh, man. I love how he was also in one of Ed Wood's final films, Night of the Ghouls, but it was not released until 84 for the video market. It was filmed back in 57. It's like, man.
I do love when you would get that, like, I mean, I guess you could make the argument, oh, Orson Welles' final film we've finally seen, but it's like, it was so more unique back in like the video days, 80s, 90s, because like they would even promote that, like you would just think, if you were naive enough at that time, that, wait, he still somehow made another movie? I didn't think he was alive, because they didn't always promote it as like, oh, he made this in like this time period was lost. They're just like, hey, new movie.
Mm-hmm. Not even shown on Turner Classic Movies. So it's like no one has any real recollection of it, and like you say, it's just very wild. Like you say, it's not easy to hit your mark on every single one, but I like you say, there is also kind of a certain just morbid appeal. It's like, how have I not seen this?
Yes, I don't watch, like, I still love to watch, like, I don't even always say I'm approaching movies like, oh, I want to, like, hate this movie. I always want to find a quote-unquote bad movie that I'm going to find endearing and just end up loving. Like, Road to Revenge, aka Get Even, is like, yeah, I can sit here and go, oh, it's probably one of the worst movies ever made. I don't care about it. To me, it's so, like, just, it's bizarre, but I had a goofy smile the entire time and was laughing. And I went on a podcast and got to talk to people, but I remember I had to watch it by myself. And to me, the mark of a great movie in that genre is if I'm having a blast by myself from beginning to end, and just John DeHart thinking he's this like badass that is like saying, here's a quarter, buy yourself a personality, and then Wings Hauser clearly just drunk off his ass. But it's but it's so much fun, and it's like that's what I kind of want to like. They're special movies. I can't give it a proper rating or proper review. You need to understand where you're coming at with this, and if this is what you're looking for. So
If
it's
a
just
3 out of 5, I think generally most people are going to get the gist. Okay, it's kind of a guilty pleasure kind of movie. But see, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I believe
I'm
in
the same way. I used to say that, but now I'm just like, if I enjoyed it, it's not guilty. And like, I might tell. I even used to kind of use the phrase, and I've kind of gotten away from it. I just call a movie a special movie, and I would say fun failure, just because then I could try to explain to some people, like, look, don't go in actually expecting this to be. I don't want to say art because it's subjective, but like high quality, but it's going to be fun. But even then, like if I call something special and you know me, then you know this is probably the highest mark that I can give. I will probably watch Road to Revenge as many times as I watch one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick movies, 2000. Random, completely different, but I get two different types of joy out of those movies, and I think you've got to talk about them in their own respects, but also know that like I'm gonna definitely go back to Road to Revenge probably a little bit more.
Yeah, and it really does suck because it's like you got to explain it to certain people who just don't get it. They're just like, "Why it sucks? This is terrible," and
it's just like, and you hit that spot, and it's just like, I'm not gonna be able to reach you with this, and I get that. So just that's if I say a movie is special, just understand. Or what I say is it's a special movie that transcends a rating. Then I think that should be the clue to everyone. If you're not into what I'm kind of into,
it's off the charts.
then just steer clear. But if you have that same, which honestly, when it comes to a lot of professional wrestlers and movies, that's sometimes what I look for. Like one of the things that kind of upsets me about like WWE does have their own little WWE Studios chain, and like they waver back and forth, but for a little while there, they weren't going to actually make the movies, but they were gonna they got kind of produced and got the rights somewhat to Oculus, which is a good film in its own right.
Oh yeah. But it's unexpected too.
Yeah, but it's also like to me, I'm like, go into the fact that you're WWE Studios, take all of your wrestlers and put them in wacky movies, and they would start putting your Dean Ambroses, your Dolph Zigglers, and like kind of like 12 rounds type action movies, or it's called Countdown, which was unfortunately kind of boring. So they at least kind of went into it. I don't think they've really done too many lately, but I mean, I'm sure they have money elsewhere to kind of burn. But like I remember, like other people are like, hey, at least they're producing good movies now. I'm like, I kind of want them to just go trash and like
Marine,
I think
7,000.
Yeah, like I love that. Like I've kind of lost. I think after the fourth or fifth, I had to catch up with the Marines. But I'm like, yeah, go cheesy action and just get your wrestlers in there. Like I think the last one, they're like, look, we're gonna just take any wrestler that we have right now off the shelf and throw them in there, and we're just gonna go with that because I love watching like Buff Bagwell pops up in a couple of like TNT movies, but he also popped up in a couple of for shame that Andy Sidaris. I was like, for shame that I'm forgetting his name.
Oh my
the Day of the Warrior, and it's just like I love it. Like, and I remember I think it was I used to read through Wrestling Observer Rewinds on the subreddit Squared Circle, so it was all Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer letters and condensed. And of course, when they talk about like stuff like that, they're like, and he's in some trashy movie. Or there was a podcast I used to listen to, 20 Years of Nitro, that would review these movies, and they weren't wrong because I mean, especially mid to late 90s, Sidaris, he was even further going with like the TNA aspect, but the budgets were getting a little bit lower. But like, I'm like, don't knock Andy Sidaris. Those movies are such fun, goofy movies, and like Buff, whether or not he's got such a goofy enough personality, I think he was probably just told go with it because he's playing like it's weird because he's playing a professional wrestler in that movie, but he's playing like a Native American, like a stereotypical Indian. So he was playing like Tatanka, who was a wrestler at that time for WWF, and I'm like, you couldn't just get Tatanka to do the role that you want to do.
Right.
But I think at that point, which is weird because a lot of Andy Sidaris movies are so heavy into TNA and nudity, I do believe those were, if they weren't being shown initially on TNT, I think he might have had like a working deal with them, so they probably edited, kind of like Sci-Fi does.
I think
some
it was
of their movies.
like USA Network. It was the TBS of that, because like Okay, there's still going to be some over-the-top content, but we're just going to cut away before we see the...
Yeah, but when we
inappropriate
put it
action.
out on video, we'll put that content back in, and sometimes we'll market that, and sometimes we won't, and you're going to be confused because, like, wait, didn't this air on TV? There's no way they had breasts on TNT or the
Mhm.
USA Network, because there was another one Buff Bagwell was in for the USA Network, Terror Tract. It was a decent, like, anthology horror movie from about, like, 2000 or so. He's just in it very briefly in one of the segments, I think is probably a pool guy or something. It's been a while since I've seen it. I did reference it though when I seen Buff Bagwell at a convention years ago, and if he remembered it, I will be very surprised. He was just like, "Hey, yeah, man, that was fun," and I'm like, "You have no idea what I'm talking about."
Right, you got to double check and say, what's the best part? What's the best part? Oh, you
But
can't
I'm pretty
mention it.
sure when I watched that on tape, there was like blood and like nudity in it. I'm like, "There's no way there was." And when they broadcast this on television, but I don't think this was one of the few USA movies they actually sent to theaters. So even if it did have John Ritter, it was the year 2000 at that point. So
Yeah, then they aired on the sister channels, Cinemax or HBO,
oh,
and then you see
definitely.
the
That was
full...
probably it too. I guarantee that had to have been on Cinemax. If it wasn't, that was primed for it.
Yeah, and God, it really did stink going to the video store, and it's like, I wonder who even wants to go to the front desk and rent it out without realizing what they're renting. Is like, yeah, can I get just the blank Blockbuster logo copy?
uh,
Oh, no shame, no shame. It's all good. And like you say, I think it's interesting watching a lot of these lost films because I mean, especially ones starring wrestlers, they almost always have like some kind of troubled history or just outrageous backstory to it. And some of them come off as very noble people who kind of just realize, okay, better luck next time. I'm gonna come back when you give me a way better content, but for now, I got to pay the bills. I'll actually tell you another story as we go along, but it's wild how, like you say, is like you never really know what you're in for until you know. And with that being said, I think it's intriguing how just like you say, just I think the one who has definitely adapted to it the best has been Ross Patterson.
yes.
With the pool boy drowning the Fury, Range
Yeah.
15, where he has so many cameos of actors playing alter egos of themselves fighting zombies, and it's just Helen Keller versus zombies. Come on, you gotta love it.
It's so funny that you even just brought that up because a friend of mine just posted that he watched it because of all things he went on like a weird Kevin Sorbo kick of like recent Kevin Sorbo movies like his
Oh, nice.
Korean, Walking Tall movies, but that was kind of one in there, and it's like I was kind of happy to see that even he kind of was like, yeah, it's like that's a good example of intentional camp actually working because they got the humor and like the humor actually was very funny. The St. James, and it was so just endearing. Like
It really was.
I
And
just remember having so much fun with that. Like it honestly exceeded my expectations because I kind of went in thinking it's probably even if it's kind of funny at first, there's no way they're sustaining this even for a short runtime. But like it's so clever.
right. And like you say, he had kind of the rare impact of just not giving a shit, but still putting a lot of effort and love towards it, but also just being like, if you don't like it, I don't care. I'll find a way to piss you off and kind of without being a douche, just kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of it's the opposite of trolling where he's just doing a shit post and it's a really hysterical shit post that took some time and effort. You know what I mean? and you can't help but just guffaw. It's like, wow, okay. Someone here has a really wacky sense of humor. I'm surprised he doesn't already have his own Adult Swim show. He has that.
I am so surprised because I remember that when I was watching that, I'm like, this is just absolutely perfect for that block, and it's baffling to me that it never happened. I guess there's still time, but
I mean, I would like to even see someone do a good tribute to someone like Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter, or Billy the Kid versus Dracula.
It is funny because I remember when I used to do, and this is kind of why I got away from because I used to go by the Cinemasoschist and that, and I still like that handle, but I used to try to review movies And I would watch something like A Billion Kid vs. Dracula, which isn't a good movie, but it was a weird disappointment when I would review it because it's like you expect something notoriously bad, and then you get something like that. It's just like, it's kind of bland and boring. There's not too much to pick apart about it outside of a few scenes. So it sounds really weird to be like, I'm disappointed this wasn't garbage. And then I was like, I've got to find ways for me to explain how I mean that, that it's not like I'm upset that I wasn't in actual pain from watching this.
Right.
But then you watch stuff like that too, and it's like, I get why it's, labeled as always one of the worst movies, but I'm like, well, in a sense, maybe that one could be, because the worst thing a movie could be is boring. But it's also like, it's nowhere near this offensively bad. Like, it's at least competent enough. It's just really bland.
Right. That, or you got to be in a certain mood to watch it, or it's just bizarre, and you don't. As long as it's not a movie where it's like, I want to be caught dead watching this, And like you say, to where if it's not to where the production values are just so careless to where you're just getting bored with it, it can't be like that.
You can't have a Black Devil Doll from Hell, Chester Breon type movie where it's shot on video. The sound just kind of gets really screechy at points.
Yeah.
The scenes drag on for too long and repeat themselves, and you're just like, I'm going to finish this because I said I would, but why isn't my enduring
Barely
this?
getting there, man. Barely getting there. Oh, man. Whew. Yeah. So, with further ado, guys, I'm gonna let Justin take on number 3.
All right, so you want me to go with another one? If I'm
Yes.
gonna go with my actual favorite wrestler that has transitioned into movies, and it's gotta probably be an obvious one for a lot of people, but it's gotta be Roddy Piper. And yes, a lot of that is off the strength of They Live. But what I've noticed with Roddy Piper whenever I watch him in a lot of these movies, especially because in the 90s, he really started doing a lot of direct-to-video and movies for TNT, especially once he had the few deals. He did 2 really fun movies with Billy Blanks, Back in Action, and...
Those were very fun.
Yes, and the other name is kind of blanking on me, but it's very similar. But what's so great about Roddy Piper is when you have somebody like a Hulk Hogan or even The Rock, who is very charismatic, but they're going to be such specimens that, okay, you're not really going to expect these wrestlers to ever like really get too heavy into the dramatics, even though credit to Dave Bautista, he's trying with his size.
Right.
But
We'll get to him.
you're always going to know that you're watching like a Hulk Hogan movie or the Rock movie. But what's hard is when they try to kind of want them to maybe be like, oh, they're just a regular street cop or something like that. And it's just so hard to buy. It was the same thing with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that's sometimes the jokes in his movies. It's like a hulking beast like that you can't buy. Roddy Piper, you can easily buy as a tough guy because he always was. But he never was this towering giant that when he has to play like that street cop alongside Billy Blanks, he just works perfectly. And he had such a good, like, charisma and weird charm to him that I would probably say now maybe Bautista is probably one of the better that's at least trying to get into dramatics. But really for Piper, he was just the most natural on screen at just kind of playing an everyman when he needed to be, but also being very over the top when he needed to be. And just
He really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, his acting wasn't even evolved in They Live, but he brought such a natural ability to it, and that's what made the movie even better. Instead of, I'm going to just try reading these, off the teleprompter,
Exactly. And some of that definitely comes. And it's interesting because a lot of professional wrestlers can kind of make that leap, at least to being in television shows and that, just because of almost for a while there, I guess you could say the improv nature that was wrestling, the public speaking, weird, almost stand-up comedy kind of routine, but they had to have like natural charisma if they were going to succeed. Now a lot of them are kind of getting more scripted, which strangely enough hurts the wrestling product, but I think is inadvertently helping them transition into actually going into like Sasha Banks going into The Mandalorian, because now she's at least used to remembering lines as opposed to, like you said, just trying to have to almost read off of a teleprompter. But when you can find that talent,
I will kill you. Yeah. and it's wild too, because you would have thought, not much to Star Wars. Those movies aren't known for acting per se,
Yeah, exactly.
Spectacle, but yeah, it was definitely one of those rarities. Like, Actually, way better than expected.
Yeah, and some of that could be like, oh, did I have my bar lowered? And that's not even a knock against her. I mean, it was probably one of the first, if my correct memory serves, it's probably the first non-wrestling thing that she would have done outside of maybe a cameo in a show. So, and even then, you're usually playing, yourself. But it's just very interesting to kind of see that, and but it's also funny because you will see your wrestlers that like they can't channel that. Like there are some movies that I've enjoyed where they were able to channel the weird Hulk Hogan persona. Sometimes obviously they were just doing a rip on well, actually a riff, but definitely a rip on Hulk Hogan as he was Rip in No Holds Barred. But like there's just so many times where it's just like Hulk Hogan's just kind of, or the better example, Stone Cold Steve Austin might have been one of my favorite wrestlers growing up, and he was an absolute badass wrestler and could command an audience. But man, is that guy stiff in action movies? And I thought like this is the perfect type of wrestler to just move into these like direct to video. Maximum Conviction, which is actually pretty decent, or there was another one.
Right, just fast forward.
Hunt to Kill
scenes. Yeah.
But like even then, like 9 times out of 10, it was just like I'm surprised at just how awkward and stiff Stone Cold is, considering like, especially like there was a time when like even after he was the big Texas Rattlesnake, he went heel in 2001 and was like doing weird comedy bits, and he kind of made it work. And it's like I know that won't always translate well to the screen, but we're not talking like. We're talking these direct-to-video movies, and it's just like, how is he this stiff? Like, just make him, like, tell him, hey, just be Stone Cold.
I blame Cinestate, which
yes,
you're up with.
Which is very true. And I think that plays a lot in, too, because I think they were just like, just be generic action guy. And I'm like, at least just tell him to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, because that would go a long way in making some of those movies a little bit more tolerable, because then some of them are just like I remember, I think it was called Hunt to Kill. That's kind of a fun little action movie, but
it really is.
But there are some other ones that like that the names are just very generic and are kind of slipping my mind that they were adequate or sometimes not even that good of action movies, but they had a little bit of just Stone Cold swagger in it instead of him just being reading off a teleprompter. He's the best version of that in those times kind of movies, and like you said,
it's so true.
It drags it down further.
It really does, and he's kind of unfortunately gone the way. I mean, he's not even doing action movies anymore. Now he's just doing reality shows, and it's like, dude, I mean, what you could have had. I mean,
yeah, it's just I really had thought, and I was like, look, I'm not going to expect him to maybe get into like where The Rock's been now, or even get in the theater. So I'm like, you could still, I mean, even nowadays they'd say it's more streaming, I guess, but like, especially when he was getting into that direct to video market, I think there was like he could have been like that last gasp of like
he really could have been
a action star, and he just even direct to video wise, and I thought it kind of got blown just with getting paired with, like you said, with Cinestate, that we're just like, we're not even gonna let you be Stone Cold, we're just gonna make you generic action guy, which you are very stiff and awkward at because that's not who you are.
I mean, really, because I mean, even more so, I mean, he was as Stone Cold as he got was probably in the Expendables, and he's not even the main star in that. So it's just like
he's very briefly in it, but like
I would like to think that, like you say, he could have been Piper or Billy Blank's kind of appeal, doing all these Taken, Dolph Lundgren type vehicles, even maybe starred a few more times with Dolph in his kinds of movies. So it's just like, what happened? Does he just not care, or is he
I think it's probably a matter of that. I know his podcast really took off, and he started working. And he's always kind of had a connection with WWE still, but I think they were kind of helping with doing other special episodes of that podcast. And like you said, then USA came in and was like, well, we can get reality shows out of you, Broken Skull Ranch, and I think he just has another one where it's kind of like a hybrid of Broken Skull Ranch, but not the competition aspect, but we're going to just goof around with wrestlers and like action movie stars and some of his friends. And he's probably getting lucrative enough deals there where he's probably just like, hey, maybe that schedule's easier than doing these movies. But yeah, it is a shame because I think it's weird too, because like anybody renting those movies, and he knew it, like anytime he would call it out, he's like, and sometimes I'm not a fan of, it's not a movie for the critics, but this is the case. I'm like, well, yeah, it's definitely not a movie for the critics.
Even the people watching it know it's not great. So it's like you say, it's kind of a shame
you get to that, and it's just like, then why aren't these movies, like we all know, he knows, I know it, the reason we're hunting these out is I want to see Stone Cold in an action movie. just let him be Stone Cold Steve Austin. Just call him something else. I don't care, but just let him be Stone Cold Steve Austin, kicking ass. And then when he used to do that guest spot on Nash Bridges in the late '90s,
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
yeah, and it worked. Or when he did Chuck, it worked again, and everybody's like, "Wait, Stone Cold's not bad. Maybe he has could have kind of a career in this." Because they're just letting him be Stone Cold, or at least playing into that persona instead of just
He was
being.
even appearing in just random ads saying, are you stone cold tough? Stuff like that. And it was, like you say, it was fun. And I mean, I think you can kind of say everyone's just kind of going where they get the easiest ratings now. TBS doesn't do the goofy movies late at night so much anymore. And I don't know what they're going to do now since Conan's leaving. So
Yeah, especially because I think I'm really
it's
trying
a
to
big bunch of ratings there. And
Yeah.
USA, like you say, used to do trashy stuff, then kind of just started doing more original stuff that half the time was just leftovers from sci-fi. And then sci-fi, was doing goofy movies, then started doing deliberately bad movies and a silent crap. And now they're just kind of saying, we're just going to take whatever original show we can finance dirt cheap when we're not importing Canadian sci-fi shows. And Lifetime, unfortunately, is now doing some more serious stuff, as well as intentionally, jabs at their old, stalker format. So it is interesting, like you say, is everyone's jumping on just to an easy stuff, just easy to do reality shows or just easy summer shows that are only going to last 1 or 2 seasons and then move on to the next thing.
And I've always got to wonder, I know people like to sometimes harp on Netflix because oh, the quality of some of their movies aren't the greatest, but I'm like, but you make me think it's going to be something like we're talking about, what the trashy stuff USA, TNT and all them used to do. And it's very surprising, and maybe we'll get there, that you don't have one of these streaming services whether or not they want to admit to it, we can call it the Paramount Friday the 13th effect, where, Paramount wasn't, the board of directors weren't proud of having Friday the 13th, and they want to say, yeah, we associate with that, but they liked the money it pulled in because they were cheap, but they also had built-in audiences that would, love it, eat that stuff up. So it's I'm always surprised there hasn't been a streaming service that kind of, the closest, and even then they're getting away from it. And I'm very vague would be when Amazon was really getting into Prime Video. They had big titles, but they would just buy up those old movies because for them they were probably a drop in the bucket. And you could still usually get to them all those 70s and 80s grindhouse movies. And it's they weren't going to promote those, so it's not the same. But it was almost I wonder if maybe Amazon might see the value in just maybe producing some trashy movies. But they definitely have been able to actually produce some good movies, so I don't know if they're going to be it, but I'm I don't know, Paramount Plus will end up having to go, we're going to bring it back to Paramount. Maybe they're going to realize that they're getting into this too late in the game because even after Peacock got in there or modernizing what they were using, that there's just so much out there to compete with that maybe they have to market towards those people instead of just saying, hey, here's some popular shows that we know you like to binge watch and some popular movies. Maybe that's not going to be enough for people, but maybe you're hey, look, we're bringing back their Stone Cold Steve Austin cheesy movies and we're going to do them right. And maybe people will be you know what, I'll pay just $5 or $10 a month for that because that's different and fun.
That's very true. We're basically kind of like when we first brought up the notion, wait, we're watching movies online legally? And so it's going to do away with TV. It's now we're back to the stage one where we're having to remind everyone nothing is going away. These are, if you don't want it on Blu-ray, you can get it on DVD. If you don't want either of those, you can find it on a streaming site to buy. And so, like you say, Tubi, Peacock, and even Apple Plus, are pretty much taking up the markets that are left over by Prime and Netflix, and even Shudder, is kind of just the trashy movie place. I can't get into it, but I know some people were digging it because Joe Bob had returned. And so, like you say, there's something for everybody, and at the same time, you pretty much just got to go back to the various sites that have, recommendations. I always do the taste dive or whatever it is, where it's if you like this, you might like this or that, based on because other than that, like you say, you'll just spend an hour just searching for stuff that either doesn't look interesting or has a very annoying trailer, and it's you just can't ask them to promote it for you. You gotta, or on boredom to do the talking. You gotta actually, put a little extra effort and search for something. And because like you say, there are so many sites that are just buying trashy movies, and Amazon and Netflix are constantly doing the whole kind of reset, Netflix for a while was just kind of buying any kind of stupid movie that was not well made and made it pretty clear they had no interest in going to theaters, while Amazon kind of did the whole, we're going to put it in theaters because we're proud of it. We did some serious calculation, hence why we bought the movie in the first place. And it's like, Hulu's kind of been doing a little bit of that too, which is interesting because they're kind of the in-between where they can either say, yeah, it went to a festival, or no, it's premiering exclusively here,
Exactly. And
So,
now
like,
that we're, in this world of like, we're going to slowly start getting back to more and more theaters opening, or more people willing to go there now that we're getting into drive-in season, which thankfully I still have a few around me.
That was actually the last time I went to the movies. I went and saw Sonic the Hedgehog, and I was at a drive-in. It was my first drive-in experience, and it's like perfect.
I ended up doing one, just as a quick tangent. So one of my
Nice.
local theaters ended up, when they had to kind of close down for a bit, and then they realized, well, we can like buy a big blow up screen and do some drive-in screenings of, some movies that were out then, or, like whatever was out and popular right before the shutdown, your Sonic the Hedgehog. And then like they would do Tenet. So then they decided, well, look, even if they didn't know how long we were going to be in this, but they're like, hey, there's at least enough of a crowd here and it's unique. They ended up just getting an actual screen, like a drive-in screen, and they permanently put it up. So they're not doing it full yet, but they did do, and I just went last weekend or the other weekend and seen Raya and the Last Dragon there. And they're like, yeah, even when, more people are coming back in, we're just going to do that for the summer season because why not? You might, because I think they also realize, we used to have one really close in Columbia, and now the closest one, thankfully, I have the Mahoning Drive-In about 2 hours from me, which does all the cool retro stuff. But most of the ones that, are going to still be kind of the mom and pop, still showing new movies like your Sonic the Hedgehog, they're anywhere between an hour to 2 hours away from me. So not too much of a hike, but I'm not going to do it every weekend. So it's kind of nice that that's there. But like family movies always do well there because families can save money and just spend, oh, I only have to pay $20 for a carload, or even if they're going to pay head now, like that's going to be cheaper than, an individual ticket. So, but it is interesting because now that we're in there, we're getting this weird exclusivity of we're going to put this on our streaming services, but we're also going to maybe put it in theaters. Now you're finding that weird, what do we still want to have that? Because we're getting further and further away from it, but there still is that stigma for certain people that like, oh, if it wasn't in a movie theater, then it can't be good, which is a dumb idea, especially considering some of those movies actually were in movie theaters, just maybe not in your area because, they didn't get
It was like $20 for a one-time viewing. Yeah, no. And that's including still having to pay for popcorn and shit.
Yeah.
No.
But it's a very interesting world that we're in. And I forget kind of how we got off on that tangent, but hey,
well,
I like it.
We were pretty much just talking about the mini markets that showcase these guys. And like you say, these actors pretty much have to, well, or even just wrestlers who posing as actors, basically had to kind of do what we're seeing all the creative bigwigs do now. They had to scratch their head and realize you've embraced your success too early. You got to redefine yourself, recreate yourself to stay relevant. And one actor who has left us way too soon, and who many forget that he started out as a wrestler and kind of had a career kind of similar to Danny Trejo, and that has to be Tommy Tiny Lister Jr.
Yes. Oh man, rest in peace.
Also known as Zeus. I mean,
Zeus. Yeah, and it's so funny because that's kind of how he started out. He was still kind of like a big tough man actor, but he was in No Holds Barred as Zeus, and then they decided to do this really weird, but I still always find it kind of fascinating, where they said, well, we're going to bring Zeus in from the movie to feud with Hulk Hogan in real life, and we're going to have him team up. They were smart enough. I think they eventually did I can't even remember if they eventually did do the one-on-one match. I know they wanted that to actually, I don't think they did. I know they wanted that to actually headline a WrestleMania. I believe that would have maybe been 6 at that time coming around, 5 or 6 that it would have been. But I think they kind of realized, because at that time they would do that, well, we're going to do a big tag match at SummerSlam, and they teamed him up with Randy Savage when Hogan teamed with, I believe it was Beefcake at the time. Because that would also stem off of the fact that, Hogan and, Savage still had that beef, no pun intended, from when they split up. And it was just more power to him. Zeus wasn't too bad because he at least had some of the training to do the stuff in No Holds Barred, but it didn't quite click, but they were able to do this really unique where they ended up doing the next match. as they called it, No Holds Barred, the match, the movie, the pay-per-view. So you would order it and you would watch the movie first for about the first 90 minutes. And then they would go to a pre-taped that they would have done at like a house show circuit steel cage match, which was that tag match, but in the cage. And it was Hulk Hogan basically versus Zeus, but now in real life. And it was so almost ambitious when you think about it. But it is funny because
Totally.
because he was really an actor, but he would occasionally go back, like when Hogan went to WCW in 95, 94, and then into 95, they just randomly brought Zeus back, and I can't remember what they had to call him then because they didn't have the rights to call him Zeus at that point because that was WWF. But they had him in like a cage match again with as one of like 5 men. But yeah, and it's Tiny was, and that was another one too that I was
Here comes Tiny. Yeah.
I always said on my podcast, Suplex Multiplex, the idea was to watch movies mainly starring wrestlers, or at least like the W.C. Fields movie had pro wrestling as, you know, a good enough part of the story that I
Good
would
enough.
include it. Like Night in the City, that pro wrestling was a big part of the story. So even if wrestlers were in that movie, but even if it was no actual wrestlers in the movie, I'm going to still call it as a pro wrestling movie because, you know, pro wrestling's the backdrop. But I even said when I was reviewing No Holds Barred, I'm like, look, some people might not would say it's too cheap to count Tiny Lister as, you know, just covering his movies, just like I'm going to cover the Friday movies someday because, well, yeah, he wrestled. And I'm like, look, I'm eventually going to count that, okay? I won't get to it right away because I'm going to want to go through the heavy hitters of the actual wrestlers and movies and that. But I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'm counting that stuff. Because to me, he was still a wrestler. He had a couple of matches. He main evented a couple of pay-per-views, you know.
Absolutely. I gotta definitely even give it up for just. I even linked to a list I made of them. I think it was interesting how. You look at his resume and you realize he was working with so many of the same people on a day-to-day basis, like just Mario Van Peebles, Trejo, even, you know, Ice-T, Eddie Murphy, and being in a bunch of Walter Hill movies definitely helped. You know, like he's in Extreme Prejudice. He doesn't have anything to do, but he's like a recurring character. You know, and so it's interesting how he's got all these other cult movie appearances like Friday, The Dark Knight, and Fifth Element, even playing the president. And then he's got
one
all
of
these
the
other
best
movies.
cinematic presidents, I might add.
Absolutely. and just his, and there he's doing just comedy. You know, he's not even doing an action kind of role like Air Force One or anything. He's just being the voice of reason who realizes he's got a lot of shit on his plate. But yeah, and like you say, he's kind of just instantly recognizable because of his eyes. And he instead of just, I don't know the story behind that, if that was like a Forrest Whitaker kind of thing or if that was just what he played up. But yeah, I always heard he was, like you say, just a wonderful guy, and we had all these people who had all these barriers to leap through, you know, besides just the ones on the stage, and actually just kind of just find what they were good at, let alone with. And he was one of those, he was able to embrace the typecasting and work in a few extra surprises, even do just random cameos in movies that just constantly, you know, played on every kind of network for any kind of market. So much like Trejo, is like, it was okay for him to be in anything because it's just, everyone knew who he was, to where he became kind of a marketing factor in and of itself. It wasn't uncommon to see him on the same poster as whoever else was headlining the movie. It's like, oh yeah, someone knows who Tiny Lister is.
Oh yeah, and I always love those movies too because they might not be in it long, but you know if it's low budget enough, it's like I always just love when it's like, oh, it's nice when that person gets to actually be marketable now because they can, and they'll always put, just because they know they're also going to try to capture which you're really not going to get too much now, but like back in the video store days when, you know, you would walk by the thing and, you know, just a, you know, common Joe might look at it and go, why does that guy look familiar? Don't say right from Friday or from The Fifth Element, and they're like, oh yeah, and they'll just take a leap just because they're like, oh yeah, I liked him in that, and it's enough that even if he's in it a little bit, they'll take that leap. And it's just harder, I think, to do. Not impossible, really. I mean, you can still do it.
Really
in, like,
not.
streaming
No.
services, but it's not. It's harder, just especially now because everything's instant. So like, somebody could like see that and be like, oh, maybe, and then the trailer will start playing on Netflix, and then you might get scared away instead of like taking that leap. Because usually that was the other thing too. If you rented a movie,
The video store, you didn't have that extra
No.
barrier. I don't know. That trailer looked like shit. It's like,
And like I think that's probably where my motto of like it's got to be a really bad movie for me not to want to finish it, or my reference. I had to have gotten interrupted, and for whatever reason, I couldn't finish it. And then when it came time to finish it, I'm like, well, okay, maybe I won't. But usually, I'm like, I'm gonna finish to the end. And I think it was just because when you rented a movie, it was just like, hey, I put my resources into this. Like I know, like my friend usually scoffs whenever people say, oh, it's on Netflix, so it's free. And he goes, well, it's not free. You're paying like $10 or whatever a month. I'm like, okay, fine, but if you look at it this way, let's say movie rentals used to be $4 or $5. As long as you watch 2 or 3 movies off of Netflix a month, everything else that you watch you can count as being free. That's how I look. It's probably the same way people looked at like HBO and that. Yeah, you're paying a monthly rate, but like once
you
you
got to
see
see
the
all
big
these
title
things.
any cheesy movie they started playing late at night, to you that was free because you didn't pay to see that, it just came with it. But when you went to the video store or something, like, hey, I took a chance and I spent money on this, so it may be terrible, but I'm going down with this. Or even better, if you would rent a video game, especially for me, there was only a couple of video games that you would ever, because they were expensive. You didn't, from where I came from, my parents was like, you're going to rent video games for the most part, and maybe you'll get the occasional game on a birthday, Christmas, or well, usually that. There was no way I was going to save my money up as a kid to get a $50, $60 game. So you were kind of stuck with whatever game you rented. So if it was a terrible game, I remember renting Superman 64 and hating it, but trying so bad to like it because that was my weekend. And I was like so determined that I was going to like this. And I was just, that was probably the first one that after a while I was just like, I can't do this. And I just didn't play it for the rest of the night. I either played whatever few games I still had. I know I had Super Mario 64, so I probably went back and played some of those levels again. Or I just finally was just like, let's hope that my friend has a game that we can play. I haven't played yet.
The video game. Oh, wait.
Yeah, he's like, I got Superman 64. I'm like, no.
Maybe if I'm on an island and this is the only thing to keep me from going insane, but it might as well be, a loaded pistol.
Oh boy, it is fun though now with the positives of the YouTube age was finally getting to see how does Superman 64 end, and like being blown away that you do eventually get past the flying through the ring stages, because that was the thing. Nobody ever. I'm sure if I maybe have read like at the time in like those electronic gaming monthly magazines, they might have mentioned past that, but like everybody just brought up like you're not going to make it past these rings, you're going to hate it. So that's all you ever thought the game was, and you find out, oh wait, there actually is like actual platforming and like kicking and punching, and oh yeah, that's garbage too. So it's not like I missed anything.
Right.
If I got through the rings and that monstrosity, I would have gotten at least something halfway decent. But like back then, it was easier probably with movies, because with games, it was more brutal because I wanted to spend so many hours with them. With a movie, like a lot of those bad movies, they weren't going to go past not 80 to 90 minutes, and they shouldn't have. You weren't always going to get the 2-hour movies. So like, yeah, and a lot of those might have hit, or they might have been 65 to 70 minutes, and they stretched it out with repeating credits or bloopers or something.
Oh god, it was a mess. And like you say, it was just interesting how he just kind of these are all, like you say, just you had to have endless amount of time and embrace what you didn't have, let alone what you did have, and then just pretty much just slowly evolve, saying, okay, my time is precious, I'm only going to spend X amount of time, let alone money, on this much entertainment. Life is short.
And I'm definitely getting to that stage, though. It's very rare for me to ever sit through a movie and say, and this is actually going to tie into a wrestler, I didn't think it was, but it will, where I can sit and say that a movie, like I will rarely say a movie was a waste of my time. I'll get something out of it, even if it was awful. I get that like war story experience. The only movie that I've ever sat through and at the end just said, no, that was a waste of time, was Leprechaun Origins, which was the reboot that they tried to do. And it is the most boring, generic horror movie you will ever see, that didn't play up the fact that the Leprechaun movies were fun and that was the campy value. Or really, if it wanted to take itself at least serious, like it barely featured, like it was a weird looking leprechaun. But the wrestling connection is they had, his real name is Dylan Postal, but his wrestling name was when he was in WWE, it was Hornswoggle, and now when he's on the indie circuit, it's Little or just Swoggle, or sometimes Little Swoggle. And his whole gimmick was that he was a little person, and of course in WWE they had him. They had a wrestler Finlay whose whole gimmick was he loved to fight because he was Irish. So of course they had the little guy Hornswoggle that would hide under the ring and assist him because of course he had a leprechaun. So it was fitting that okay, we were gonna reboot Leprechaun. I'm like, okay, put him into it, but like, outside of him probably just wearing the weird headpiece or whatever, like there's nothing like why would like that was a case of like they marketed him because they knew they were going to get, and that was a WWE Studios movie too, but because they knew people
Right.
like, oh, I'm curious to see what Hornswoggle would be like as a leprechaun, and it's like you never really even see him do anything, and you barely see this creature, and it was just a waste of time because I just remember sitting there thinking this is so just boring. There's nothing to this movie. There's no tension. There's no cool kills. It's not going to lean into the cheese factor, but it's not unique, or the creature isn't cool enough that they can at least get away with being a halfway decent monster movie or anything like that.
Exactly. It's like
And
there's got to
that
be
was the time where I was just like, this was probably only 80 minutes or 90 minutes. I'm like, okay, I need to start valuing my time because that legitimately was an actual waste of my time.
I pretty much have ways to do it. Everyone likes to act like there's one or platform or the other. Is like, yeah, use what you got to use, but don't deny yourself like an occasional like free trial for something exclusive. Like when all these platforms were first starting out, no one wanted to bother with them because they were already paying too much for the other stuff, despite being cramped indoors. And I was just like, just give it a year, and if your friends are talking about it, you should see it. But like you say, you also got to, like you say, just determine what ring you want to be in.
I like that, tying that back into the wrestling ring. I like it.
I had to. I was just like, because it is true. It's just so hard to just know what you want to make time for, let alone, how you want to access it. And, if titles are just piling up on your, on your bookcase and you're not watching them, then that's already bad enough. So like you say, like I've already done enough eBay bidding for the year, so that's it. No more.
Honestly, that's where I have been at, because I'm sure if you don't know, I'm going to let you in. There's a great site called HamiltonBook.com, Hamilton Books, and they get a lot of great like Blu-rays for cheap, and even some of the like the boutique labels, they'll get some of the back stock, so they'll still be like 15 or $20, but those are ones that went for like 40. And there was a while there where I just started buying so many, and I kind of stopped. I'm like, look occasionally, if there's something you really wanted, snag it.
I'm looking at it now. It's kind of like swap a DVD, kind of.
Yeah,
but like you say, it's not out of print, despite being the first, thing that comes up.
And it started with like books and that, and I still get books from them too. But like you just mentioned a bookshelf and that, like my bookshelves and my Blu-ray shelves are just like flowing now. That I'm like, I'll still look there occasionally. I did just order something recently, but I'm like, I need to start actually using a wish list and just occasionally looking back at it and thinking, do I want to throw this? Because there are some movies that I'm buying. I'm like, I know I'm buying them too because they're only like $5 or $10 now, and I will watch them eventually. But maybe I should actually watch what I have.
Totally. Instead of just get suckered in and then realize, it's now streaming, you bastards.
Well, that, or just like, just like sometimes I'll look over every now and then. I'm like, oh, damn, I did buy that. I almost went and bought. I actually did it once. I did buy because I just didn't think to look through the pile of like, okay, I bought these recently and I haven't, properly put them away. I'm just putting it in the corner, and I was like, there's no way I bought this. So when it arrived, and I didn't only spent like $5 on it again, but I was like, wait, I already bought this. I'm like, well, somebody's getting a gift. And that's when you've hit too much from like, okay, I got to break this habit, and I definitely blame the quarantine, because that was kind of like that was replacing going out for a while and thrifting or whatever. So
it doesn't help that you put them in your cart and then they're gone the next week. It's like, what are you doing here? Are you trying to sucker me into buying it finally now?
Well, that's the thing. Like it's the same thing as like when you're out of the thrift store or video store, you get that worry of like, what if it's not there? And like, I know it'll still be able to get it on Amazon, but I'll go and look, and I'm like,
I'll still pay more for it online, or maybe I'll pay less for it online, but I don't know until I try.
Yeah, or like I know if I get it now before it gets sold out of Hamilton Book, I'm saving $5 to $10. Then if I waited, and then like eventually if I buy it on Amazon, it might be full price again. And I'm just like, you gotta fight that urge, because it might also end up on streaming, or maybe Amazon the
just
price.
Wait 2 months. Let's see. Oh God. I use everything. I even put Walker in 1, 2, 3 movies once in a while, but I'll use,
Yes.
all the streaming platforms. I use what I need to do, and really, I'm only gonna really want to buy it if I just see that there's some special features, and I'm anyone on the review sites lets any of us in on the gist that, hey, yeah, there's multiple cuts of the movie for the first time ever restored, or there's a hysterical commentary by someone like Jim Wynorski. He's like, okay, so gives it extra value in and of itself. I gotta listen to that.
Well, and like you said, the restored's the big thing too, because some of these movies you love watching them, but like the only DVD they may have ever gotten was a Mill Creek, where it's just the VHS, so you're not actually getting an upgrade, and it's just like I know with Rituals, it was one that everybody always talks about, and I enjoyed too, but like the copies that were always available were kind of murky, so the big finale is dark enough as it is, so it's always one of those. Yes, it's a really good movie, but like I wish I could have known what actually happened in the ending. So when you come out with a boutique label that's like, hey, we've got Rituals, we've cleaned up an actual original print, you're going to actually be able to see things that happened in the dark, you jump at it and like, yeah, I'll pay the 20, 30, whatever the boutique label wants, because like that time it's really worth it, because we're
not
getting
happening again.
The restoration.
Yeah, gonna sell out instantly to where it's like, well,
and that's why they can get those go for prices, because they can only do a limited amount, and like everyone from the collectors now are just going to jump on it. So it's like trying to buy a ticket to a concert or a wrestling event. Actually, it's a wrestling event. It's like trying to buy tickets to like WrestleMania in its heyday, or even now, but definitely when wrestling was in its big booms, where it's like if you didn't buy those tickets the day that they went on sale, called Ticketmaster, went up to the booth, you were going to get shut out, or the scalper was going to buy it.
No refunds, so it's like you gotta just go with it, learn your lesson. It's definitely something to be said, and I think we definitely all missed the theater experience. Well, actually, definitely the concert experience in and of itself, because I mean, there was just something to be said. Is like, I'm not just at a concert; I'm with other people I like. I've invited friends, so it's like.
And even with like going to movies, like I remember when I went and seen it, and I actually I'm gonna watch it probably at home, but I was contemplating renting out, like doing the private theater for it, or if I could have done private IMAX, but it doesn't look like that's an option, I would have definitely went for it. But Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong, and I remember when I went and seen the last Godzilla movie, The King of the Monsters. I don't mind. I always tend to go, like, if I can go with someone, or if I know they're going, great. But I'll go to movies by myself. We're going to be in silence. But I remember that's one I went 7 o'clock by myself that Thursday, just because I knew my one friend's schedule wasn't going to work. And like I'm leaving, and just of course there's another Godzilla fan. We're just both wearing Godzilla shirts, and we're just like, oh my god, that was awesome. And like sometimes that's fun. Like you go to these, and it's like, especially when you go to like any of these kind of retro shows, like Mahoning Drive-In does retro movies on 35 millimeter. Or I would go to the
that's lovely.
In Philadelphia. Everyone's there because they love that. So I usually go with buddies, from our groups and that. But if I don't get to, and I'm going up by myself sometime, I'm going to get there, and it's all like-minded people. They're not just people going to a movie because it's out. They're going because they want to talk about this. So I'm like, I'm going to have people. Or if you go to a concert, maybe the opening acts we might not know. Everybody is there to see the main band. So everyone you can talk to there is going to like the same thing you're going to like. So if you start to feel, awkward, it's just because I remember even with like concerts was the one thing that I was like, I don't know. But there was like, there was times there was like bands that I wanted to see. And I was just like, look, people can't go. And this isn't something like they're going to, hey, we can't go Friday night. You want to go Saturday? Well, no, they're only here once. Like wrestling, the event is only here. It's only coming to Philadelphia now. It's not back for another 6 months. So you go, and it's just like you're going to be seated next to people that they want to see the same thing as you. So you can just strike up a conversation if you want and get into that atmosphere.
Absolutely. Oh man, and like you say, there's just something to be said for when it's just very wacky and just outrageous, and there is just some stuff you got to see live, and it's like if it's more than just a award show and it is an actual cool event, I can totally understand what we've seen since the late 90s, where just you order in by phone or through the digital app nowadays. It's just whatever private event, and just say let's gun it, let's do it. And I got the salsa, you got the chips, we got the beer. Let's do it.
Oh man, that was my big thing too. Is I'd always have friends over for like your WrestleManias or SummerSlams, and it was either they might have split the cost, or what we usually do is like, look, I'll order the pay-per-view and pay for it as long as you bring the pizzas and the food. We'll call it even. But that was, another thing that, and I know the companies knew, like your WWE's, WCW's, they knew they were going to tell you do that for the free TV stuff, but we want you all to buy it. But they also knew people weren't always going to splurge $30 to $40 on a pay-per-view by themselves, but they're going to get buys when people are going to go into their groups and watch it together.
Right.
So
it doesn't just happen overnight, and like you say, you got to just kind of do trial and error. Like, I know now what movies to or not to introduce to certain members of my family. Versus what I'm totally comfortable trying. And so, like you say, it doesn't. There is something to be said for it, and at the same time, it makes a difference when you actually know how to handle it.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because my cousin's husband, he has very similar movie taste to me, big into horror and definitely some of the weirder stuff. So whenever we would have like the Secret Santas, like if we got each other. Like, and we would always say, it wasn't Secret Santa, we'd just be like, hey, you have this person or whatever. We would love it if it was us, because, like, we would always ask for, like, certain movies, but we knew the rest of the family members, like, we either didn't want them.
Make sure they're out of town. They are not going to understand this.
We didn't want them to start looking up some really weird movies, and also, maybe going down rabbit hole. So it was always kind of nice when we got paired together, because then, like, we can go, all right, you can ask for what you really want, because I'm going to know how to find it and actually get you the really weird stuff or talk to you about that stuff, because like we knew what we could recommend to each other. Like I knew I could recommend Baskin, which is just batshit insane, movie about like a portal to hell. Like the best comparison you could say was like a Hellraiser movie. That's somebody I could tell him, hey, watch Baskin. But like, I mean, I would find it funny to tell like an aunt, like, hey, watch Baskin, and then they just hate me for life. But I'm not going to do that, because they're not going to like that kind of crazy, obscene.
They're not going to even get the joke. Oh, I see. You sent me the wrong movie intentionally.
Which is amusing, because, God rest her soul, my grandmother loved that stuff. So I love the fact that I could actually, when I got old enough and got into it, I'm like, wait, my grandmother loves stuff like Hellraiser? Sweet. She was one that I could actually recommend that stuff to, and she would eat it up. But like everybody else was just like, what's wrong with you guys?
Are you a psycho? I've never seen taboo stuff like this. I changed the channel or anything I hate. Yeah. I actually learned that experience last Christmas. I introduced my siblings to Gremlins 2. They were not digging it. My mom just decided to be polite and say, well, I saw the first one with you last time and I didn't like it the first time, but because I get the humor it's going for and you're my son, I'll watch this with you. But and so then just the next week they still want to do a Christmas, or the next day they wanted to do a Christmas movie. I was like, for real? I thought I killed the mood in the scene here. The mood was dead. I was the only one laughing like an idiot. And so they're like, no, it's cool, bro. Just let's watch Die Hard like we always do each year. And I was like, okay.
You didn't sick Santa's sleigh with Bill Goldberg on him?
If they were wrestling fans, probably. But
well, you know what? You could have just told them that Fran Drescher gets like her head burned in the beginning, and also James Caan is randomly in it in the beginning as well as Chris Kattan. What the hell?
The most random ass cast known to mankind. I definitely, I think it is on Tubi and Prime commonly, so it would definitely be interesting if podcasters who review movies seasonally make it be a Christmas movie.
And you know what? I will defend Santa's Sleigh. I know some people, even the WrestleCrap guys, kind of ragged on
it. It was fun,
but it knew it was fun, and like I just have a blast with it. Like it
comes on Spike TV back in the days. Your argument is invalid, people.
And my favorite story that comes out of it, well, two is one, yes, it is funny that Bill Goldberg, somebody who is obviously notably, Jewish, was playing a killer Santa Claus, but one of the strippers in the scene that wraps her legs around Santa's head, he ended up actually hitting it off, and they got married and they have a kid. And I'm like, that's so awesome. So I love the fact that Santa's Sleigh actually brought like a family together. That's
hysterical. I'm sure they have amusing stories in it. Much like anything Goldberg says, it doesn't make much sense, but it's pretty funny just to hear.
Yes.
I remember, I think, what was it? I think I was somehow on ESPN radio while on the way to do valet parking, old story, and probably circa 2016, and someone was analyzing Goldberg's fitness workout, and it was one of those, so he ate a bunch of honey, and then he did these different workouts, and then he ate more honey with this kind of bread. So that's sugar. So I'm just gonna let that workout plan sit since this isn't making a lick of sense.
It's like anybody tried to do the Rock's workout. It's like
Yeah.
for a man like him, it's like that workout only works for a weird specimen like him.
That and for the right price,
Yes, that too.
When I heard that Hugh Jackman was getting fit and he was having him be his workout, trainer, I was like, yeah, it all work. For if he likes you and you're a celebrity partner, he'll help you out. It doesn't just happen overnight. So since we've gotten to number 4, I'm gonna let you pick number 5.
Okay, number 5. Whew, this one. Let's go. We kind of touched on a couple of people, so you know what? Let's circle it back to, since we said we are gonna bring it to him. We didn't even touch upon. Let's talk
gonna
about
give it to you.
Yeah, yes, Demon. Let's talk about Dave Bautista.
Yes.
Because I actually am very surprised at how well he has transitioned, and a lot of that does go to the fact that he genuinely doesn't just want to be an action star. This dude's like, no, I'm actually going to take the acting training, and he's like going to do everything he can. Like, he works so well in comedy, obviously, as Drax, but can handle some of the drama and the action. But even in that short opening scene that he had in Blade Runner 2049, I'm like, dude, this guy could legitimately do dramatics. And it's going to be so interesting because he's going to be somebody that is going to be kind of, hard because he's always going to have that unique look. So it's hard to, but even then in Blade Runner 2049, I bought him as just this kind of like, lonely farmer, just kind of like, I'm like, yeah, I don't buy him as a muscle
and he
builder.
says a great line like at the end, it's like, we're all just machines of our own visions or something to that extent. And it's like he got to say one of the deeper lines, kind of like Rutger Hauer in the original. It's like, that's cool.
And it's cool, and it worked. Like,
it really did.
Like,
and
I sit there, even somebody, and it's not a knock against him because we'll talk about him, but like The Rock is a tremendous personality, and maybe he has it in him, but I don't know if he would have been able to pull off a line like that. And I never knew because I definitely watched at the time, I always watch, but I was never the biggest Bautista fan. I got the appeal and definitely understood why he was a big hit with the fans because he had this unique look, and he did kind of, he did have a good presence, command. He could command that audience. He get a good control over them. That's the word, which is very funny because then you find out that the reason he used to always wear shades is, and you never really get it. He has like severe stage fright, and it's just like you never really.
That is wild.
And it's wild because even though I would never say he was this great promo or anything, I never got it because I thought he was bad stage fright. I just thought like, hey, some people aren't good at that. Some aren't. Even though he ended up having such a unique promo and like aura to him that he made it work anyway, and he got more comfortable as the years went on. And of course, now that he came back, after going into acting, he was definitely much better. But yeah, he could like legitimately, and he wants to kind of like do some of this drama stuff. He was good in Hotel Artemis. Like anything I've seen him in, like genuinely, like if I had to choose out of all of them, I still choose Roddy Piper as my favorite as the transition. But like Bautista's running up there is probably the best like all-around performer. He can do your action movie roles, and I haven't seen it yet, but I've actually heard decent things even about his My Spy because everyone has to have.
He was great in that.
Yeah, I heard he was good in it. It was actually pretty solid. And
it's not a movie you'll remember, but it was just a very easygoing crowd pleaser, and he was game for doing a lot of the body language in addition to all the Jackie Chan type comedic action. So it's just like for a while, it seemed like for a while people like to treat him either like the Bernie Sanders of entertainment, let alone Bernie Madoff. He's taboo in some circles. Some people were even taking a constructive interview he was saying, and I kid you not, I saw like 2 articles. I read it. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a diss, and you're saying he's dissing The Rock. He's not dissing The Rock. I'm sure there's some jealousy and there's some ego to it, but it's not a diss. And like you say, producer Randall Emmett, that's right, the same guy who produced hit blockbusters like Street Kings and Lone Survivor. That dude has embraced the Lionsgate, has his own Oasis Films production where he almost always has some kind of Training Day, Die Hard, Lethal Weapon type movie, at least 3 of them a year that get limited releases and video on demand stuff, starring the likes of De Niro, Whitaker, Bruce Willis, and even Frank Grillo. And it's interesting how he was able to incorporate Bautista into some of those movies. He's fantastic in Heist, generically named, but it's by the director of the tournament, and it's just a very awesome mix of heat meets speed basically, and he was just believable as the gruesomely violent robber who has totally different agenda on the hostage taking. And then he was also in Marauders, which was another fun inside man type heist film as one of the feds helping out Chris Maloney. And it's like, I can't believe that's a wrestler,
Exactly.
His blunt delivery of just saying, we got to get these fuckers, it just was great.
And I'm glad you brought up that those interviews where people are like, oh, he's just The Rock. Like, I never took it that way, like you did either. And I don't even know if The Rock would have, because I think The Rock is. I look at it the way,
from the same background.
Yeah, and I think The Rock wouldn't even disagree. Rock, I look at it as kind of like Robert Downey Jr. wants to be now, where Robert said, he had his time where he also got to do his heavy dramatics, and he'll still get to do that. But he wants to be that rock star, superstar now, where he is going to be your Iron Man. And now, well, granted, I don't know how well panned out, but I'm going to do big blockbusters like Doolittle. He just wants to do stuff like that.
Disney stuff, can't resist.
Yeah, and I can respect it if he wants to do that. And I always took it. Rock is like, hey, that's my bread and butter. That's what I enjoy doing. And when Bautista is coming out, he's not saying, oh, that's bad. He's just saying, look, that's what The Rock wants to do, but that's not necessarily what I want to do. I do want to be taken seriously. And on top of doing stuff like that, I want to be able to try to actually, stretch my chops and do small roles here and there just to kind of get that seasoning. So yeah, I know, I remember when you said that, I remember people taking that the wrong way. And I'm like, look, I was never the biggest Bautista defender, but coming out of that, I'm like, no, I didn't think that was an insult at all. It was just looking at what their approaches were. Like, The Rock is a bona fide movie star, but he is basically playing The Rock, and that's not a bad thing. Like we said, the issue that game with Stone Cold was they wouldn't let him, for whatever reason, play Stone Cold. You put it this way, Humphrey Bogart was a tremendous actor, but 9 times out of 10 they were going to hire him and like, you're going to play a Humphrey Bogart type character because that's why people are coming to see this. They want to see you play Bogey. That's something you're going to get with somebody. Okay, that's what somebody's going to want to see with The Rock. You're going to want to see somebody, especially with somebody that has such an over-the-top appearance now, which is funny because he was always going to be a big, fit guy. But when he first started in getting roles and acting on like a couple episodes of Star Trek, then obviously Mummy Returns, Scorpion King, Rundown, he was in shape, but he was in what his wrestling shape was at the time. And now current Rock looks like he would eat that version of The Rock because it's just like, it's almost like it's
even in interviews. Like, you look at his older interview, you can YouTube it, where he's doing a press release for Walking Tall. As some of us know who've listened to the commentary or heard interviews, he and the director, Kevin Bray, did not get along. Kevin Bray is this guy who likes everything a certain way, does commercials and guest directed, TV shows. And, The Rock's, just done Scorpion King and hit, critic and audience gold with the Rundown. And so it's like I think he definitely learned a lot from there. Is like, okay, if you're gonna have creative differences, you gotta figure them out ahead of time before you even sign on. Mm-hmm. And like you say, in the interview, he's definitely putting on a lot of forced words if you look real closely. And like you say, no, Bautista, he definitely had a similar kind of goal. And I mean, so he definitely picked McGee's brain and got to, he got to play a mock version of the A-Team with Eric Roberts on an episode of Chuck. He was also on an episode of Smallville, even appeared in a Werner Herzog film. But it was interesting too that he was in, I actually knew a friend who worked on the set of this movie. Well, he knew someone else who worked on the set of this movie, so to speak. There's this movie he did called Wrong Side of Town.
I have seen that one with Rob Van Dam.
He's easily the best part of it, but for whatever reason, it was just a very crap shoot. And apparently the guy read that, or heard from Bautista himself, like that he was just so disappointed in his performance that he went and literally did some private acting. He was just at classes. He's just like, I am not going to do this kind of shit ever again. Regardless of what it is, if it's good or bad, I must, he pretty much approached it just like the wrestling. It is his brand. So he must, approach it just like that. And, he does the junky House of the Rising Sun, but I think he really hits gold when he gets to be in Scorpion King Free, Man with the Iron Fist, and Riddick all back to back, and really just be a key part. He's not only having key fighting, but gets to do more than just wise ass lines. Like his wise ass lines are also characterizing his character, which are mercs or warriors. Yeah, that very much well said. And I really do get annoyed when I see people who say, "I don't know what Bautista's done." It's like besides Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm like, he's done so much more than that, or even.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because when he was in the Bond movie Spectre, I remember some people were disappointed because they thought he would have more like speaking lines. But I kind of looked at it as, to me, dialogue isn't the only good part of acting. It is that how you handle yourself, body language, and like even in that small enough role, like yeah, he got to play the bodyguard henchman, but like I thought he handled himself well, and like I remember even just some of his body language. I remember liking that movie, so I was always kind of bothered when people are like, he didn't really do much in the movie. I'm like, were you not watching him? Like I'm not saying it was like a tour de force, but you could tell that he was like, hey, I'm not really going to give too many lines, but I'm going to make that work. I'm going to use my body language to be menacing or, quizzical, stuff like that. And it worked. Like, and I remember, and I mean, honestly, it was probably, the best part about that movie was definitely Christoph Waltz, but that was one of the Bond movies that I thought was okay, but a little kind of iffy. But like, I remember, like, his scenes were definitely the most fun. Like, they done so much, like, classic Bond as well, which they were definitely doing a pretty good job of trying to like, we're going to do a more modern, somewhat more gritty take on Bond, which is great, but like it took them, sometimes they kind of get that balance well. Like I thought Skyfall was terrific, but sometimes they just couldn't get it. But I remember that portion of it, I was like, yeah, you got that old school, Jaws type fight, and it worked well,
Really, really, really. And just, I mean, the best part about any villain is how they die in Bond movies. So, I mean, for him his only line of dialogue to be, oh, shit.
Yes. And again, it was great because it was like, you've got to, like you said with some of his other lines, you need to be able to know how to deliver those lines. There's some actors that have actually said that they find, and I kind of agree with it, it's harder to do comedy than it is to do drama, because comedy, there's so much timing, and you have to almost have this natural ability to really work on it, as to where, not to say drama is easy, but like there's a reason I think most comedic actors or comedians, once they start doing enough acting, can kind of like always blow you away and goes, oh wow, they were actually good in this drama, because like, well, yeah, I think they're just like, it's probably easier for them to do that because they had the harder task of doing all of that, but doing it as a comedy and doing it with good timing and just good delivery and making sure it works. So even a simple line like, oh shit, like you've got to make it not come off stiff. You've got to make, and it's just, he pulled it off so well where it worked.
I think you're on the money. I mean, I think it helps too that, I mean, he's done enough trial and error to where, like you say, it's not uncommon for him to be in a few different dramas or different things. I mean, and he's embraced different kinds of audiences. So if you don't watch superhero movies, you probably know him from the Riddick sequel or Bond films. If you don't know him from that, you probably saw him in some of these experimental weird movies like Hotel Artemis or LA Slasher. But then, he's been in a lot of movies that saw plenty of other audiences, like Enter the Warrior's Gate wasn't all that, but he was good in it. And Bushwick was a post-apocalyptic movie that was on a lot of streaming sites. And then being part of Kickboxer, Rehash, the sudden death inspired final score, and then the Escape Plan sequels, that definitely helped.
As well as the Ip Man. Was it not It? Was it Ip Man? Wasn't he in one of the kind of like Ip Man spin-offs? Which one was it called though? I can't remember the subtitle.
Ip Man Legacy.
Yeah, that was it, man.
He's in that, so there you go. He's embraced at least 5 other franchises, so and including Blade Runner. So there you go, and even gets to appear in one of the short films that was released online prior to it coming out. So
and he gets to be in Dune now too.
Yeah, Dennis Vinal, loved working with him. He guest starred on Room 104 for HBO, and now he was also in the quarantine version of The Princess Bride that was directed by Jason Reitman. So there you go. So yeah, My Spy was a good step in the right direction. Other than Wrong Side of Town was all he needed to do to just kind of get pushed in the right direction, but that didn't really affect him. And I don't think enough people saw Stuber, so I can't possibly see him being too affected, by anything that doesn't work out his way. I don't think, because I mean, The Rock and Kevin Hart are always going to have an audience, for instance, but they have done a lot of stuff that hasn't been, agreeable with every audience. So, like you say, I think he's had some of his misses, but I think he's had way more creative endeavors that have at least allowed people to showcase him as a muscular talent who can bring some heart instead of just being a gentle giant or some other just vague, not well used role. Because you kind of look at Randy Couture and it's like, man, was paying him a bunch of money? Because other than a few roles and TV recurring roles that were kind of lowbrow, like The Unit or Hawaii Five-0, he didn't really have as many movies post Expendables. And it's like, but that was supposed to launch you into, kind of like Stone Cold, just be a B-movie superstar.
Yeah, I think, and I'm pretty sure I know, like, there was that brief period of time where they just kind of, and I know Couture popped up at them, and I know Stone Cold probably did too, where it was like they were old tournament cage fighters, but now we're like, quote unquote, we're just going to say, hey, look, this is an MMA movie. Like, we're just going to make MMA and we're just going to let them play themselves. But like, there was that little kind of market where he had that. But yeah, it's like, that kind of dried up for him a little bit quickly. And I was surprised by that as well.
Yeah, he's got like 6 projects in development, but it's just like, well, I don't really even know what his audience is anymore, other than like, the UFC fighting guys who still see him on occasion, or I don't know, maybe some of the comedies where he's played a wrestler or something. I don't know. So it would be interesting to pick his brain or even get him for an interview and see what his next plans are. Because, I mean, he did another movie that was like post-COVID and it was kind of just very average despite having the star power. So I would definitely like to see him be in one of those other big all-star cast movies. But, I would probably pick some new people to be with instead of just continual just decline. And so yeah, no, good pick on Bautista. I definitely, I was gonna list him one way or the other, but yeah, no, at number 5, that's terrific. I'm gonna go with number 6, and I don't know if you're gonna expect this, but you mentioned him earlier, and it reminded me. Adam Copeland, also known as the Edge.
Yes, Edge.
It's interesting how he's kind of conquered his market. He's kind of just been doing a lot of TV recurring stuff, and again, a mix of the WWE movies and then just a few other things. Like I thought, did you see Interrogation? I thought that was just decent, easygoing fun.
I did see Interrogation, yes, because I think I even covered it. I do kind of agree on that one. So there was a couple of times there too where, like, the one downside of WWE is they started getting the most generic titles here, like Interrogation, Countdown, and I'm like, okay, hold up, like now
it's got to have a wacky name in addition to the wackiness on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I remember he did that one, which it wasn't good, and it doesn't help that his co-star is somebody that it rarely works for me, and that being Jamie Kennedy. But I remember they put him in like a weird buddy cop movie with Jamie Kennedy.
That, yeah.
I think it was like Breaking All the Rules or something. But I remember even then I was like, Edge works in this kind of role, though. I like Edge in it.
My pals too told me about that. My pal Jeremy was like, "Oh, Edge is awesome. I didn't like that movie, but that was great."
Yeah, pretty much. It doesn't help that it's just like a little bit of Jamie Kennedy goes a long way for me. So it didn't help either. But like, and I'm curious because he has just recently returned after having to retire because of neck injuries and, modern medicine.
Really?
So he is back as a wrestler. He came back last year. He did go down with an injury, but he's back again and is going to be main eventing WrestleMania again this year. So I am curious because he's definitely serious of like, hey, obviously he's got to still be smart about it and he's not going to do his crazy dangerous matches. But like he is like, I do want to start wrestling on some of television. Some of the more pay-per-views don't want to just do the occasional match. So it's like, I wonder if he's going to kind of go away because I didn't see it yet, but I know he even did a movie that came out, I want to say last year, rated
Money Plane.
Yeah, Money Plane. I'm trying to think if that was like right at the height of COVID or not, because I remember more people that normally wouldn't talk about movies like Money Plane were starting to talk about it. I was like, I wonder if that was just one of the lucky movies at the beginning of COVID.
It
people
pretty
had
much
extra
was.
time, and we're just like, all right, I know Edge, and I think Kelsey Grammer's in it too.
Thomas Jane.
Yeah, it actually has a pretty damn good cast to it that I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm like, yeah, I'm going to check that out. It sounds decent enough.
And people started the fake rumor that it was like a sequel to Money Train. It wasn't, but it was interesting how that was going around. And then, like you say, even How Did This Get Made even covered it. I'm like, that's a pretty recent movie for them to cover.
I know. I seen that they covered that. And I was like, because that kind of threw me off. I was like, wait, is there another Money Plane that maybe existed? Because I'm like, they'll do some recent movies, but they usually give it a couple of years. But
they had a lot of fun with it, and they had some outrageous interviews and commentaries like this is why this doesn't match up because it was so low budget that whoever was filming next door, the lawnmower was so loud that they had to just keep waiting, and so that's why the hallucinations or flashbacks were different than the actual scenes. It's like that's great. Everyone took it to the bank. The Photoshop wasn't convincing, and yet everyone still wanted to check it out for whatever reason. It's just that kind of appeal.
And I love the fact that there was that rumor about it being a Money Train sequel, and it still sometimes happens, but like there was a time when they could have been like, you know what, it is a sequel to Money Train, even though it has nothing to do with it because we want your money and we want that.
Name
That
only.
still happens occasionally. I mean, well, I guess in that case it's just the ideas, but like there was a Kindergarten Cop 2 with Dolph Lundgren, and I know I haven't watched it, but they did a
Yes,
Cop
they
and a
did.
Half 2 with Lou Diamond Phillips, and
That was wacky.
and I'm forgetting I think her name's Lulu Wilson. She was she was actually really good in stuff like Ouija 2 and Annabelle Creation. And I haven't watched it yet. It's another one that has been sitting in my collection to watch. But I heard Becky was pretty fun with her and Kevin James. But like that's one I picked up for cheap, and I was just like, because I kept hearing pretty good things about it, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I should just pull the trigger on that one day instead of buying more stuff.
Right. And
But I remember when that was like, I love that we're getting just name only sequels to like Kindergarten Cop. That makes sense. That was big, but like
I
Cop
still
and a
think they
Half.
should do Kindergarten Cop 3 with Shaquille O'Neal. I would love to direct something like that.
Yes. Good
I even
shit.
have I did a fake trailer poster for it once. I did so many
Yes.
fake movie posters that were all just like I was that bored of working at the airport. It's like, yeah, here's some movies that no one's come up with that they should totally do.
Oh man, I know he still does his appearances in the Adam Sandler movies, but I do wish that Shaquille O'Neal would actually like not just appear in movies, basically cameos himself, but I kind of miss when he tried to be like
I
Steel,
know.
Shazam. I love
Still-
that kind of goofy shit. Like, are they good movies? No, but
Still
like,
is just wacky. Everyone should see it. Yes.
yeah, it's
and-
wacky enough that they're like such. You know, you've got to see it and experience it, and I kind of miss. Like, I wish that
Especially
he
when
would have
it's
kept doing that even in a direct-to-video setting, and just like,
right. Oh, that's the other wacky thing. Those were theatrical, but yeah, it's like, but yeah, that would have been funny had he just kept doing something like that. Just do a random ass comedy like Shaq's Rap All Star Gang, and have a bunch of unrelated segments where he's like being a police officer, a super cop, or super robber, or super.
I
Doc.
legit think he should have tried to make Shaq Fu into a movie. I would have paid to see it.
There you go, Shaq Fu. Yeah, because he is a black belt. I'm like, that's what a waste. Why are you going the Gina Carano way, where you're just on Twitter and then on a stupid talk show? I was like, no, you should keep doing it. Keep doing your movie career. Oh God. I mean, just the scene where he's yelling at Charles Napier's superiors, just saying, "You all is full of shit. Get your head out of your ass." I'm like, brilliant.
I love it. And that's the same appeal that you get with wrestlers. Like I don't know if I'm actually going to put him on the list, but like there is that novelty to seeing Hulk Hogan in movies. Like obviously he was always going to play Hulk Hogan, but I even liked when he started, like you said, doing the TNT movies or Assault on Devil Islands or The Ultimate Weapon was actually kind of a fun little action movie where it's just Hulk Hogan kind of like chewing the scenery.
Right.
I kind of love it because Hogan, like it's to his detriment that he is such a unique person because he can't really put him into many roles that aren't like he's gonna take to, but there's just like he's got that like appeal though that like I have a soft spot for your Suburban Commandos and even your Mr. Nannies
Oh my God.
just because of it's just this weirder, even though it can be such a drag to get through, there is still a weird charm to Santa with muscles.
Absolutely. Even freaking Assault on Devil's Island and The Perfect Weapon, where he goes all serious, all Patriot games. It's like, whoa, okay.
Or my favorites, even though they weren't, but we're all stuck about TV, is when he would like guest on shows like Baywatch, and I will always remember, and I'm going to quote them again. My favorite was when the 20 Years of Nitro podcast ended up talking about those episodes. It's like they even said, it's like, look, we're not trying to be mean to Hulk Hogan because the guys are like we're not sex bots or anything. But it's so weird because in the episode of Baywatch, they're trying to like get Pamela Anderson saying like they have crushes on Hulk Hogan and they're fawning over. I'm like, look. Hulk Hogan is not a sex symbol. He's a very unique looking individual, but I would never call him sexy. And that's not meant to be a slight, but it's so but it's so like fun to watch that when he gets to kind of be, marketed almost as such. Because even in some of those
missing tape scandals, so
it was, and that's the thing when that sex tape comes out, like everybody's like, don't actually watch it. Like that's maybe a morbid curiosity, but nobody's going like if Hugh Jackman's sex tape came out, everybody's like, hell yeah, I want to. People would be like, I want to see that, but like nobody wanted to see Hulk Hogan having sex.
Yeah. Oh god, the stuff that gets out there that makes you wonder who turned the cameras on. And like you say, I mean, it is funny how you never know what you're in for either. I mean, so it is funny how you find how someone has some kind of scandal and it's like, for real? That's a thing? Someone had some kind of feud? For real? Okay. And so, like you say, it would be funny if he had gone a different way or if he just kept at it and just said, hey, how about we try this or that? Because I don't know that he even knew what he wanted to do other than that, hey, it's another additional source of income. Well, man. So,
and I think there was a part where Hogan maybe, I think, wanted to kind of be, maybe not the next Schwarzenegger, but did kind of want to be. I mean, I know they thought No Holds Barred was going to be this giant hit. And honestly, God, I think it would have been a bigger hit had it not opened, like, I think it was a week before or a week after Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That was a dumb idea. I don't know whose idea that was. I think because it was, I mean, I know he was still his peak, but the popularity was starting to wane by like 88, 89.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think if you would have put that maybe even a few weeks before or maybe somewhere else in the year, I think he would have had a little bit bigger of a hit. And I still say that movie knows what it is. It is ultimate cheese. That is just so much fun. And of course, the rumors, almost at this point, confirmed true, that Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon would just do rewrites of the skit and like go into a hotel room and just snort a bunch of cocaine and just spend like 48 to 72 hours awake in a hotel room on the weekend, just like gotta have this and that. And like that's where I imagine the comic genius of Dookie came from. But that's just such an instant where it's just like, movies like that, it just puts such a big, dumb, goofy smile on your face, and like I love it.
Absolutely. Oh man. So is that, would you say Hogan is your number 7? Or
you know what? I am gonna include Hogan.
Go for it.
Because for what
movies
Hogan did, like they were cheesy movies, but like there is such a unique quality Hulk Hogan that it's even in some of the. I mean, there was a absolute piece of garbage, and I wanted it to be campy fun, but I remember they did. I don't know if you've ever seen Little Hercules. It had Hulk Hogan, Big Show. It also had Elliot Gould because he started appearing in anything. But the main hook was the little bodybuilder who was called Little Hercules because he's this like 10-year-old or whatever kid who's like built like Arnold Schwarzenegger and pumping
iron.
It
by the writer of Sidekicks or something?
It was. So they basically made this.
No, it was. Oh,
Honestly, I think you were correct. I could probably look it up, but I'm almost positive that it was. I'm going to look it up real quick now that I'm curious. But I think it was. But it's also one of the ones where it's so hard. Of course, now I look up Hercules 3D. I'm getting the Legend of Hercules. No, I don't want that. We're writing Hercules. Little Hercules. That'll work. Little Hercules in 3D. There we go. Other Hercules movies coming out in 3D, ruining it for me. I am almost positive it was actually from the guy who did Sidekicks. But I think what also kind of just hurts for movies like that is it's so hard when you're doing more modern versions because they are going to go the route of even John Hurd's in that. I completely forgot John Hurd, Judd Nelson, David Naughton, obviously Nick Hogan, Brooke Hogan, and Linda Hogan, all. But literally, I just had the most athletic cat. I'm surprised Fisher Stevens wasn't in this.
Right, he was still keeping the sidewalk after Short Circuit.
Oh man, I keep forgetting how IMDb's new layout is. I get so used to like director being right at top.
I loved it when it was easier to even make the whole combined detail, so you could see it all the same year, in order instead of all this go individually by their profession. It's like it's always, and it never fails. Whatever title I have rated last always comes up first, and I'm like, they weren't in that. Oh, they're just only on there because of special thanks or associate producer.
Maybe we were wrong, but the writer did do. Wow, actually, this is even more amazing. The writer wrote Electric Guide in Blue, Dr. Detroit. And then it's so funny to see because then he started embracing like Steel Justice, which is a really fun one. And oh my God, he even did Backyard Dogs in 2000s, which is the backyard wrestling movie with I forget that. I hate to just stereotype it, but the Black Power Ranger, who was actually easily the best part about it, Walter Jones. I always forget his name.
Walter Jones. Okay.
Yes. But like he even wrote that one. That one has some fun to it, but also I kind of had some fun with Big. Maybe it was the director then, but that's honestly even more bizarre that it was him than I. It's just so weird that he went from Electrical Light and Blue to that. So let's just look up the director, but I know. I thought he did have the Sidekicks connection, but he did not. We're going to say he did. No, this director did not do much else. but you know what? I'm glad I looked it up. Mohammed Khashoggi. All he did else was actually Little Hercules in 3D was his last movie in 2000. Oh, no, hold up. Yeah, no, that was his only directorial credit. I am sorry.
Oh my God.
He had 4 producing credits. He also produced Football Days. I'm not going to butcher that name. And The Other Side of the Bed. And then he did pop up as a clerk in Little Hercules in 3D, as well as a waiter in Other Side of the Bed. He was doing his Martin Scorsese, where he's going to pop up in his movies. But he's going to be smart, and he's not going to sometimes Scorsese would, but I'll just be like a quick waiter or something. I'm not going to be, or Alfred Hitchcock was just in the background. I'm not going to be a heavy character in this movie or have a.
I must be in the movie, damn it.
But yeah, I'll include Hulk Hogan just because like he's somebody that like when he was in a movie, I had to seek it out because like there was gonna be, and some of them were painful. You had Secret Agent Club was like the even worse version of Santa with Muscles, where it's just all the worst.
Another Home Alone. Yeah. His type formula is like.
But and he would be fun when he would play, like if he popped up in something like Muppets from Space or Spy Hard, and
that was definitely the first one I ever saw him in as the bodyguard.
Oh my God, Muppets from Space, he's legitimately funny in because there was that weird time where like in 1996 he turns heel and he revitalizes his career as the Hollywood Hogan, but then he's still popping up in movies like Santa with Muscles and Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain, and these were filmed or even were filming at the time. But he was still playing face. Like it was so funny because he would be in Three Ninjas, and when he was filming that, he was a heel. So you think, well, there's an opportunity to make him the heel bad guy in that movie. Instead, it was like Jim Varney and Lonnie Anderson, and he was just the stereotypical Hulk Hogan like character that was a face. So it was the cameo in Muppets from Space that was like, we're gonna have you as the Man in Black, and we're gonna be like, weren't you supposed to be a good guy? Ah, no, I'm in it for the money. And he just embraced it.
It was great, and that's what I always dug about the Muppets, both the '70s original show and tonight, and just seeing that, even seeing them do what they did with the Muppet movie, especially, and that was just having various cameos, and it actually complement the movie instead of just be distracting. Just
they know how to do it perfectly.
And they would always have them be either a comedic version of themselves, like George Takei, of course, was on one of those, and is like, same thing there with him. There, it's just like the main henchman. He's like, well, I mean, I can just stand here and let you guys get away, stuff like that. And I definitely got a compliment for number 8 and 9. I'm going to do a double header. Obviously, we got to put The Rock up here because even though he has done so many financial security movies, he's done, and even if you're not a Fast and Furious fan, I think it's interesting how he just when he intersects with different movies, he's still come a pretty long way considering how he had to fire his agent and stop, doing movies on dares. I mean. And do a bunch of other cult movies that don't get talked about much and show comedic and dramatic chops. He was just, he kind of ignored the show after a while because he was balancing so much busy stuff out, but he really was good on Ballers.
He was.
And I mean, Faster is a very underrated revenge movie that doesn't get talked about.
You know what? And honestly, I did think he was very solid in that. Like, so even though I say he's not, like, maybe, and I think it's just by choice that he's not going to maybe go the Dave Bautista route. Who knows? If he did, he might be able to pull off that line that, Bautista
He's
pulled
actually
off.
only done one movie for those same producers.
Yeah.
It was like this heist movie that no one saw in 2013.
Was that Empire State?
That's the one. It
yeah,
wasn't very
Empire.
remarkable, but
Yeah,
it was.
because even that's the one that I kind of just because I remember Southland Tales. Some people looked at that, but like, yeah, but Southland Tales was meant to kind of be big, and that just got like bungled and all of that. But yeah, I remember Empire State was the first one. I was like, well, that just kind of came out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, no one knew what to do with it, and I'm sure he learned from it too, saying, I'm not going to do stuff like that ever again."
Yeah.
I'm
But even
going to keep embracing. Well, I mean, everyone has their preference about where they want to go
yeah,
in
and
terms of
that's
their career. And sometimes it gets awkward when the stuff that we like from them, they don't like. So it's
yeah.
like,
But even with The Rock, like, and it's not a surprise because he always, like, one of his big things was the charisma he had and his humor. That's what got him over as one of the big things that got him over as a wrestler. But like, we did talk about how comedy is hard to do, and he pulls it off. He'd always been pulling it off tremendously well. I wasn't the biggest fan of Be Cool. I didn't think it worked all that well, but he was easily the best part of that movie, and he handled that role. Even now, I don't even like. I haven't gone back, and I know some
even playing a
well.
version of himself in the Wrestling with My Family is like,
Yeah,
that movie was kind of.
Really good in that one, playing
Yeah.
version himself. And honestly, both of the Jumanji movies, I wasn't crazy about the newest one, but like his comedic timing is really, really good, and he was able to kind of take somewhat of a thankless performance, because you don't think of a movie like Jumanji as having really deep performances, but there is a hard
Right.
to pull off that you are pulling off a character that is supposed to be this nebbish kid, and he actually does pull off the nerdiness without it with it being endearing. And I was like, there is a quality to him that those kind of acting does get overlooked just because of the fact that it's coming into a big
What
budget
you used to
form.
be versus what movies you do. Like you say, yeah. I mean, people have to remember. I mean, people would always balk when they saw who was advertised as being on Inside the Actor Studio next week or whatever, and it's like, well, that's just it. Someone's going to see all these movies because there's just some kind of charm about this person that everyone sees. So. No fair just saying, whatever. It's like, no, that's something.
Yeah, and it's different versions of like acting too. I mean, sometimes we say, oh, some people only play the same character, and I'm like, or they just play themselves. I'm like, or maybe they are just playing a character and they're just really good at that one character. I mean, also, if I was in their position, hell yeah, just keep doing that one character and doing like little tweaks onto it if need be. But I
Same
also
thing
think
with comedians,
Yeah, but I also think a lot of times it's like, well, because there's the market for that, and Adam Sandler's a great example. I always would hear that from people. They would scoff, like, oh, Adam Sandler just does the same dumb comedy. Even if they like those comedies, they were just like, oh, he doesn't do anything else. But then where it's like, well, here's, Spanglish, Reign Over Me, the biggest one I used to recommend, Punch Drunk Love, and now Uncut Gems. And sometimes they would just be, or the Meyerowitz Story, and they would just be like, I'm not really interested in that, which is fine. But then I'm like, well, then why are you complaining that he's not doing that stuff when he does it, and then you don't want to watch it? But but there's a thing to that. Like, it is hard to pull off comedy, and like, I am curious to hear, and I remember when they did that roundtable around the time Uncut Gems was coming out, and you had Robert De Niro in there as well, as Jamie Foxx in that, and like, you actually kind of genuinely, like, you could tell that De Niro was just like, he did kind of want to pick Adam Sandler's brain, like, well, you did a lot of comedies, and that's obviously something De Niro's trying to do more and more of now. And like, to him, he didn't look as, oh, you do comedies. He was just like, that's a different kind of art form. Like, that's something that I find kind of hard to do. Like, and he just looked at him as like an equal in that phrase. And I honestly kind of like that, because it could have just been, we're just going to focus on Uncut Gems and then some of the other dramatic works you did. But no, let's acknowledge the fact that you do comedies, but you're doing something right with that it's working for people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Sandler fan, but I mean, there was something to be said when he was on SNL. He was stealing the show, and so it's kind of, I think the thing is, some of it is legit, not caring for the stuff, but then with all these people we talked about, you can sense when there's some jealousy in the criticism. Like, people are jealous they don't have that career, or that they didn't have some of that money going their way, and it's just like Lorne Michaels always acts like, we didn't know what to do with him. It's like, bullshit. You got rid of him like you did anyone you did on SNL who was brilliant. you had some of the best people and you never use them anymore. Like Kenan Thompson right now is on there still, and he's kind of been being used the same way Daryl Hammond is used, just as a backup. It's like, yeah, so that's not the best use of someone's talent if you're going to do that.
And it's always funny too. They brought up SNL because the thing that I always find interesting is no matter what, you're always going to have Saturday Night Live's not good anymore. It happened even when Sandler was there. But what's so interesting is people were always go like, these people aren't funny anymore. But then when they finally branch out and like get into their superstardoms and all their other
their
shows,
own stuff, yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh, wait, these guys are great. And it's like, and then they go back and they can reassess them like, oh, this stuff was really good or these characters were good. It's that nature that SNL is. It's both in the way that it's produced. It is definitely like amazing. And I love reading about it and like watching that documentary. It's stunning, but it is kind of also stifling. And there is also that thing of like, I mean, if you go back and watch some episodes, like anytime that comes with a sketch show, and I think it hurt Saturday Night Live, especially because it's something that we're going to do X amount of weeks and we're going to have that week turnaround each week. It's like, you're going to have so many, maybe a diamond in the rough, but you're going to have a lot of rough because you can only have like in that weird way that
they're
do
not
everything.
Getting enough sleep. And
you're not, and sometimes that can work,
yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes it's funny in the moment and it doesn't really translate well when it hits down. And we can tie this back in because The Rock also was tremendous whenever he would go on to SNL.
Did you see his earlier appearance? I remember them re-airing it, I think, a few years back, and it was just downright hysterical. He was ahead of his game because he was... I mean, he had done plenty of other appearances. The Rock Obama skit is hysterical, but yeah, then he appeared on there later. I forget which season, but yeah, the earlier one was wild because he had a few appearances by other wrestling buddies, and then he did a random skit that you would have probably seen from the likes of Eddie Murphy or someone, just where he's in a mock interview session and they're doing a montage, and it's like, that is so wild.
And I think, if I'm correct, I think it was that SNL hosting gig that really kind of, I don't know if I could say that got him the Mummy Return, though it might have been, but that was definitely what kind of put him on the map to like, obviously people still wanted to kind of get him in because wrestling
dug him in
hot at that time.
Yeah.
But that helped like tremendously because like you said, I mean, he just blew that away. And even like, I am not a Chris Kattan fan, who did pop up also in Santa's Sleigh, and it's, as somebody who does not like Chris Kattan, just Roxbury stuff, I just don't find him funny. It was kind of nice to see him get taken down by Bill Goldberg in the beginning of Santa's Sleigh. So I never liked that weird like monkey boy character he did. It just wasn't for me. I will say the one time I found that skit funny was when he did it with The Rock. I thought The Rock made it funny, and I thought they worked well off of each other. And I was just like, wow, The Rock just made me... The only other time I could say I ever found Chris Kattan funny was I did like the Night of the Roxbury skits. Right. It doesn't really work as a full-length movie, though I still kind of have a soft spot for that movie, but it definitely does not work as an 80-minute movie, or barely 80 minutes. But I do think that was the other character that kind of worked, but it's just... I just never really found Chris. I found Chris Kattan annoying, but not in like a funny annoying kind of way. Like,
yeah,
I never really cared for him. But to me, I remember even at the time, I was just like,
I think he got a big head because
definitely.
And then he just went back to just doing just very stupid, just movies that no one's seen. And it's just okay, well.
I think Corky Romano is probably sunk him, which he's not. He's not good in it either. But I can't put the blame solely on him. That was just a terribly written movie, no matter what. But like, yeah,
if you look at the star power, it's excellent, and it's just like it's just not hitting. Whatever it is, it's just.
Also, there
Dana Carvey had something about it that would make you watch anything he was in. And I mean, I even like some of the movies that everyone else blasted from him. We should just do an episode of the best SNL actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
that's my next appearance.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, no, that is so true. I think there was just, I mean, I couldn't flip a channel without seeing some random E or NBC interview with him talking about how he got his tattoos and why he was seeking out movies. There was just something about this Dwayne Johnson that, I mean, and it helps now that his ex-wife is like his talent agent and he's thinking about everything, the kids and everything. Really, the only thing I'm disappointed by is he hasn't joined the Expendables yet. And to be fair, a lot of that blame should just be planted mainly on Stallone and Abby Lerner just doing too many budget cuts. And I mean, I don't know why Stallone said he just was so tired he didn't want to keep doing it even though he was under contract, and then said, well, at least let me do one more Rambo, and then milk the Rocky franchise even more, even though it's already perfect. We don't need more Creed movies after Part 3. We're good.
Yes.
It's like, I think everyone's in a bit of an abyss where they're trying to see what they want to do versus what they should actually do. And it's just like, The Rock was actually asked, I think you can YouTube it somewhere, and was like, "When are you going to be in Expendables 4 or 5?" And he's just like, "Oh, I haven't earned it yet." It's just like, some people were in agreement of that, but he's like, he was just sugarcoating it, making it nicer. And I'm like, nah, dude, you've totally earned it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because I remember, I mean, Expendables 3, it underperformed. I don't know if I would have said it bombed. I don't have the financials with me.
I don't think it's bomb, but it was
definitely
definitely there.
Yeah, but I remember like that was at the time where like I mean, The Rock didn't revitalize the Fast and the Furious franchise, but you can't deny his inclusion helped with it. Same with Statham, where it's like they were starting to revitalize it with the fourth one, but then they were like, okay, we brought The Rock in, and there was a lot of fanfare coming to that. So I remember after that, and I think that's what to call back to Stallone. I think he was probably hurt by it. Like they were saying, no, you should put The Rock in this because he might revitalize the Expendables franchise, and I think they were.
He probably got a big head saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
he can't take my franchise from me."
He's talking about it. It's all because of me.
Oh.
Not because of Rocky or Schwarzenegger, any of them. It's because of me. I always love doing a bad Stallone impersonation. It's my favorite thing to do. I'll just randomly bring it out.
What you gotta do?
You know what you gotta do. But
Enough of that, I'm the law. All right.
but and there we go. I forgot. How did I talk about Hulk Hogan and not bring up Rocky 3 and Thunder Lips? Oh well.
That is definitely
It
one of
just
the
hit
best.
me. I never even did that. But like,
Oh man,
uh,
definitely one of the best wrestling takedowns too. And I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I mean, basically Johnson did kind of ape. He kind of brought the charisma and strategy of Roddy Piper, where he would star in some of these cult movies, and definitely cameo as himself whenever he gets the chance, much like Hogan.
Mhm.
And then he's just kind of, what he did was just the whole, can you smell, I'm going to give you the people's elbow by doing, a kick to the floor. And then, of course, joining G.I. Joe, doing his take on it, as well as Fast and Furious, he was basically doing his own take on that. And then it was just, like you say, funny how he and Statham are both known for having big heads, but kind of not to where they cause a delay in filming. And they were so sick of Vin Diesel's shit. That's just so funny how, because he was always being compared to Vin, and I saw so many people saying I prefer Vin. I'm like, The Rock hasn't done too many great movies, but I really like The Rundown and Walking Tall.
oh,
And
Rundown's a lot of fun.
the Scorpion King gave me and my uncle just shit-eating grins. I'm like, this is a Saturday morning cartoon. This is fun. And it's just, like you say, it's just, everyone was just always talking about Vin. I'm just like, Vin's just done so much just wannabe attempts at, he's kind of like Van
He's
Damme.
trying too hard sometimes.
He's like Van Damme, but without giving a damn. So
Nice. And I also kind of always thought that was somewhat unfair too, because I'm like, and this isn't so much of a knock against Vin Diesel because I don't mind him, but like The Rock has so much more personality and charisma that like that's one of the things that sometimes holds Vin Diesel back is he can have kind of somewhat of a charm to him, but it doesn't always work, or it doesn't work the way that he thinks it's working. And it just comes so naturally to The Rock. And honestly, it's funny you brought up Jason Statham. It comes so naturally to Statham that it's kind of a shame. And now it's not so much of a shame because they're embracing it. But like there was a time where it's like you would start seeing that even early on when he was in, snatching that with Guy Ritchie. And it's like, Statham is a really funny guy, and like I think people finally really opened up to that and just started embracing it more in the movies because of I want to say Spy as well, because I remember some people were like, I didn't even know Statham was that funny. I'm like, dude, I've been saying it for years. You watch this guy's interviews or the few times he would get to kind of be comedic in like some of his movies. The guy is really funny and charismatic too, like as opposed to just having. Yeah, and I always Statham's another one that I quite enjoy. And honestly, he has some decent range to him. That Redemption, aka Hummingbird movie, I actually thought he was really good in. And even though it was somewhat of a middling movie, I still kind of liked Homefront, and I thought he did a good balance between action.
Definitely, yeah.
But I love the Statham. I'll watch the Statham pretty much anything. So,
I will
but
too.
yeah. But it is funny too because sometimes people will argue because The Rock is, to go back to him, and I guess even Statham in here. But hey, Rock's one of the most profitable men right now. But then there's like, well, is he really, or is it because he's attaching himself to these franchises? I'm like, well, one, he is so elevating them by his presence, and two, yeah, maybe a movie like Skyscraper kind of underperformed, but San Andreas with him was a sizable hit. Again,
Rampage, he was doing so much fun.
And Rampage was definitely like, yes, I know it had the IP, and I grew up with those games too, but that was being sold off of The Rock, and that did well. But let's look at like Hobbs and Shaw. Yes, they still had to call it the Fast and Furious movie, but like if The Rock and Statham didn't have at least enough star power and goodwill to them, that wouldn't have performed as well, and it did really well. Like, and I enjoyed the movie as well, but like financially. So I think there's definitely something, and we're also in an area, and it happens to everyone, where it's like the downside to being that big rock star is your movie doesn't have to bomb, but if it underperforms, they're going to treat you like it bombed.
Right, because you were the star.
So like that almost always tarnishes you. So I think, and I remember kind of seeing that was starting to happen to him with Skyscraper. It was like, well, I guess people are starting to go to that. I'm like, look, it was one movie that underperformed, that was not on, like, even though it had a big budget, wasn't on the scale of some of his other big budgets.
It was a direct-to-video movie made with a bigger budget.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It did not hide the fact that it was a Die Hard clone. They were like, yeah, we're going to put that in the poster.
Towering Inferno, even a Enter the Dragon type hallway appears.
They had no. They did not hide that fact, and for me, I was like, for what it was, I enjoyed it. I liked The Rock.
I thought it was all right.
It wasn't great or anything, but it was decent.
But I think the biggest issue was just it kind of took a while to get going, even though it did have a lot of funny Easter eggs, like him downing almost a gallon of alcohol after dousing his wounds with that. And like you say, it is interesting how, kind of like Bautista, he realized, I can't wait on the studios to keep marketing me. After 4 different movies for Universal, or Sony, I gotta go my own way, and I gotta just keep, like, I think that's what Ballers was his attempt at doing, and now of course he has a sitcom that's based on his life that he hosts. So it's just like he's doing every kind of thing he can do to stay relevant, even if it's not what you want to see. But I think he's going to keep hitting some gold eventually, much like Bautista. It's been hit and miss for some, but I think he's done more hits in terms of, just like you say, he's embracing every kind of audience, and being part of multiple different franchises is definitely a way to help everyone out.
Exactly. And that might be something where down the road he might feel like, hey, I am going to finally take another chance, just because I have all this marketability built up in that. But it's what he wants to do, and I think he does it very well. So he definitely deserves to be on this list. And I'm going to let you say what your number 9 was going to be, but I have a feeling I might know what it was, maybe, because you were going to kind of pair them together.
Absolutely. More or less, I mean, Vin Diesel recently released a rap single, and I think everyone who listened to it could say it was anything but listenable. But it was interesting how The Rock did a random rap song to bullshit around, and he joked later, I did it just for fun. I was joking about sex. This is like, okay, but then he comes back and he actually sings later, and is like, he's actually not a bad singer. He's got some vocal range for Moana. So it's like, there you go. I think he's gonna keep finding the side of him that really rocks, and pun intended. So number 9 and 10, I'm gonna mention number 9 and leave you with the last one. Kevin Nash.
Oh, you know what? Not who I thought you were going to go with, and I'm glad you did, because that was actually going to be my number 10. And I'm going to go for my number 10. I think I am going to go with who I thought your 9 was going to be. But yes, I'm glad you said Kevin Nash, because that is somebody. No one
mentions him enough.
No, and that is somebody that, like, as a wrestling fan, I was never the biggest fan of him. It's another person I kind of go back and appreciate some of him, but, like, I mean, I liked him when I was a kid because NWO was cool, and I loved the Wolfpack for life. But, kind of hard on him. But, like, I remember he would start popping up, and, like, he got to do his big man roles in Punisher, but, like, he is a very funny guy in general, and like when he was popping up in comedies like Grandma's Boy, this guy is very funny. And then in both Magic Mike's movie, he is really good in the Magic Mike movies.
He really is.
Whoa! Like in the second one,
Super
XXL.
Shredder and Ninja Turtles too.
Oh, I love him as Super Shredder, but
Dead
Like-
or Alive, Longest Yard. So there you go. He's got some. Even John Wick as the bodyguard of the club. I thought that, like you say, there's some fun stuff there. Could he be in some bigger stuff? Yeah, I haven't seen Chick Fight yet. It's been kind of getting welled on, but I'm sure I'll
Yeah.
check it out eventually. But
I'm sure, honestly, I'm sure he'll probably be one of the better parts of it, and that's saying something with that cast. But
right, I mean, he's come a long way, and I think he has a way better resume than some of these guys. He apparently was even an extra in the cyberpunk sci-fi movie Free Jacks. I'm like, I should rewatch that now, see who he's played.
that is one that's been on like one of those I need to see that for so long.
Oh,
And now that
really?
you said that, I might have even figured that out because I remember maybe I did because I remember when I was going through when I was starting up Suplex Multiplex, I was trying to go deep and just look up any wrestler that I might have even thought was, and I knew Kevin Nash popped up, so I might have seen that. I was like, whoa, I had no idea he was in Free Jack.
I love how everyone acts like it was a dud, and yet it seemed like it made some decent money.
Oh,
And yet there's on the whole, yeah. I mean, gross 70 million on a 20 million budget. So there you go. But it was interesting how Anthony Hopkins wasn't proud of it. But what was interesting was, it had a high audience score, and on the DVD, there's clearly like two different like critical blurbs on there. So it's like, okay, I mean, I'd hardly say it was a bad.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I had always believed that it was a bomb until, like you said, when you start researching it. So I don't know if it was, I would have thought maybe if it was something that was kind of popular, like at the box office, but then most people are like, it wasn't that good. But I know critics land, but I wonder if it was just a matter of, it wasn't this gargantuan hit that maybe they were expecting it to be. And again, it's just one of those, because even when you look, and I know why it's a bomb considering the finances going into it, but it is funny to me whenever people like consider Waterworld a bomb as if nobody went and seen it. I'm like, a lot of people still went and seen Waterworld. It still did really good at the box office. It was just one of those movies that it cost so much, and that Kevin Costner was such a huge star that the fact that it didn't. That it underperformed, and I think that one did technically bomb because of how much went in. But I'm like, but you hear bomb and you think, okay, nobody went and seen this movie. I'm like, no, dude, a lot of people still went and seen it. It just wasn't as many as like you would have expected coming off of stuff like The Bodyguard, Robin Hood, and what was the budget that went into it. And I kind of like the fact, because I remember when I finally got around to Waterworld, I was like, honestly, I kind of like this movie. It's not like it is rough around the edges, but like I was always told it was terrible, or like I remember my uncle just said, yeah, you don't need to see Waterworld. I'm like, I thought it was pretty inventive, to be honest with you, and ambitious. And like some of the sets were cool, and I'd be curious to see. I think they put it out in Blu-ray to go back to when you would buy a Blu-ray. I think there's like a longer cut that some people actually say is pretty good. So I'm like, yeah, it's rough around the edges. But
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah, I think I don't know if it was like a TV edit and like they edited it back in, because that's always the fun thing too. As much
It
as
really is. Yeah.
as much as I sometimes want to say, oh, you kind of want to rag on like whenever movies had to be edited down for TV, either for content or just they had to cut scenes. But it's also interesting because sometimes they'll, for running length, they'll have to add scenes that got cut. That it's just, I mean, even the original Halloween, like
It was one of those the director wasn't proud of because they took the movie away from him midway. So I love how there was a comic book of this. I don't know how it got. That's good. Okay, I think I see what I'm talking about. Well, I can't find anything on that. I know that happened with Johnny Mnemonic, which I fortunately have the great Blu-ray for that. It's like such a different movie, and it's the same kind of difference I had, where I was telling people about it, and they were like, not gonna give it a chance. I hated the original so much. I'm like, no, please do. It's such a different movie, so differently scored, so differently edited. Like even the infamous "I Want Room Service" is not barely audible, let alone in the new version. It's just like you say, is like there are just some movies they are worth rewatching a new version of it. It just really changes when you go back and change it. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I did just look it up real quick. I wasn't able to find the blue of it yet. Maybe it didn't get released. But yeah, so that Waterworld, it was the ABC television version restored nearly 40 minutes of material.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
cut
that's
against
the
the will. So that's what it was. So it's basically, I think, I want to
That
say
one,
maybe
yes, that one did have a new director's they cut. Yeah,
and I'm wondering if that one, if it's just the TV edit as itself, or if they found a way to kind of like take those TV scenes and still include everything else that was in, like a more proper director's cut. Because I'm sure they had a cut too with.
there
Water.
really wasn't anything to really change other than Gene Triplehorn being naked. So there you go.
No, that's true. You got a point. I was going to say maybe for time, but if they were adding 40 minutes, then no, they would clearly needed the more time instead of trying to cut it down for broadcast time. So that wouldn't have been an issue. Because I know sometimes that was an issue too. It's not, oh, we cut something because it's content. It was like, look, we we need to fit in the commercials, and we don't. We would go 5 minutes over a 2-hour time frame, so we got to cut a scene for like 5 minutes from this just so we can stay in that 2-hour block, or else we have to go into a 2.5-hour block.
One scene is all you need. Take out.
So, but yeah, I am really happy that you brought up Kevin Nash, because if he wasn't gonna be one of the 10, I was at least gonna give him
honorable mention at least. Because
there is somebody that it's almost, I don't want to say dishonorable mention, but after I like 10, it's somebody that I was surprised didn't translate well to movies, and but I'll get to him. So that's a little teaser for anybody still listening, because I was very surprised to see him not transition well.
Okay. I mean, he definitely did bring an interesting Dolph Lundgren kind of appearance as the Russian in the Punisher movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, also as Super Shredder and Ninja Turtles, that was interesting. And more or less, I think it's interesting how, for lack of a better word, how he basically, aside from being that comic book thing, he was supposed to be Sabretooth in X-Men, but that role went to Tyler Mane. And I
could see it. I wonder if
he and Nathan Jones, who are also both in Troy, kind of got punched into that same kind of table, kind of like pretty much.
Funny, I was about to say, do you think they maybe thought he might have been almost a little bit too big, or like for Sabretooth? But I mean, Tyler Mane, it's similar enough build. And when I say wide for Kevin Nash, it's not a fat thing, but I mean, he does have very big, broad shoulders. So when I say wide, I mean, like, because when I think of Tyler Mane or something, like, he's a big guy too, but he has like kind of that, but he's almost somewhat lean around that area, as to where Kevin Nash has like really big shoulders, which worked for Super Shredder. I almost wonder if that would have like maybe killed him from like certain roles like Sabretooth, because I know they're going to be, when it comes to roles like that, they're going to get very nitpicky on stuff like that.
Oh, totally. And the talent agents like that are not afraid to even say hurtful shit like, oh you're not big enough. Oh, okay, what does that mean?
Exactly. And like, yeah, because that's the very interesting with the Kevin Nash. He's very tall too, but like just around there, I always kind of thought about that. Like, yeah, because now you say it, I'm like, I could have maybe seen him as Sabretooth. Like, when you said it at first, I was like, I don't know, but I'm like, you know what, that would have been interesting, especially after seeing what he would eventually do.
Absolutely. I didn't realize that he was also on the Wayne Brady show, let alone Swamp Thing and the Love Boat. So he's had some interesting TV appearances.
Oh my God, that Love Boat. I want to say, was it him?
Even 98.
Who else was it? Buff Bagwell, maybe. But I remember, like, for whatever reason, I think I remember hearing that shoot ended up being a disaster.
I think so too, because it didn't. I think it had decent ratings. People were watching all kinds of junk, like the new Fantasy Island and other shit.
And honestly, it was around that time when it was the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars boom. So I know that probably played a factor in it, because it was like 98, 99.
Yeah,
so it was that time period where like late 90s into early 2000, man, like that's anybody in wrestling, they're like, okay, we got to hop onto this because these guys are red hot, and
if you're not watching Leno and Letterman talk shit about each other, then you're like you say, watching a live event that's also countering the ratings.
And you're watching Hulk Hogan in the NWO take over the Tonight Show, and then he somehow wrestles. Jay Leno does. Man, the 90s were a wild time.
They really were. I think just his separation from WWE was just very an ugly separation, if that makes sense. I think whatever happened there, it just, he and Vince McMahon did not leave it on a high note. So I think I would not be surprised if McMahon just cost him some roles when people were saying, hey, which one of your wrestlers do you recommend? You get some money on the side, man.
Yeah. And I know, I definitely know there was probably the way that, him and Scott Hall had left WWF for WCW, and then really the Outsiders gimmicks and all that. I mean, he's been pretty much back in their good graces. On a good chunk of that probably also has to do with the fact that he is still friends with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. So he always comes and goes, but yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised around that time too, and especially then too, because like anytime you would have these like cameos for shows or movies, for a fact, like Ted Turner or Eric Bischoff in that case running WCW was probably trying to get these guys into these shows, but then Vince McMahon was finally catching fire again after taking a beating for 83 weeks or so, and then he's probably stepping you don't want those guys, you want my guys. So it just became very interesting. My favorite thing is to watch any movies from around that time period and just how big pro wrestling became again, just like in the mid to late 80s where that started to pop up in like pop culture. You watch movies from around that time. Charlie's Angels, you have Drew Barrymore wearing the Stone Cold shirt. Even in like watch Nickelodeon shows, my favorite thing was when that Crybaby Lane movie started getting attention again, and it was a decent little movie. And honestly, I think it was so overblown to the fact that like there might have been a few calls, but like it wasn't too terrifying for its audience. It was just we played it once and it did okay, and it was a matter of we just never really ended up replaying it for whatever reason, and it like of its own. But it's funny because if you watch it was around like 99 2000, and there's like posters for The Undertaker who even he like The Undertaker, this very cartoonish character. He's a mortician or an undead zombie sometimes, or like this cult leader, but like he was starting to pop up in some stuff, you know. It was just such a wild time to see these people, and yeah, I think Kevin Nash gets overlooked, and I think even with the Magic Mike's movies, because I think the first one I think has a little bit more claim just because it was Soderbergh, but like there's always going to be those people that are just going to scoff at that idea. But like they're both like they're both legitimately good movies and fun movies, but like there's some really good performances all around, and like Kevin Nash was really good in those two. I really loved him in that second movie.
And it seems like, I don't know, like he and Kurt Angle, I think Kurt Angle had an attitude problem and he didn't have an attitude problem. He just didn't have a good divorce from the WWE thing. He was just running into too many conflicts of interest. And like you say, enough people either knew him or had seen what he was capable of and just kept giving him a chance. And so that's why he got all these hysterical and tough guy supporting roles, and not even that one Asylum Thor movie was enough to dissuade me from just checking him out. He just has some kind of likability about him in interviews I saw him in, and I mean he's in so many other movies everyone forgets he's in. I'm just like, yeah, whatever it is, I'm checking it out. I don't care.
And I was gonna wait for this honorable mention, but you ended up actually mentioning him. So Kurt Angle is my, I guess you could say, dishonorable mention, because he is somebody that I thought would have transitioned perfectly.
Yeah, he looks like
I actually do understand why he didn't, considering the time period. But like he took to professional wrestling like immediately. But what was always amazing about Kurt Angle, and some people would almost say sometimes the detriment, was this guy could pull off comedy well. He was so charismatic. And yet when he transitioned...
He looks like Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Well, when he transitioned into the movies, it was the mid 2000s mostly, and that's what I think it didn't work, because he had a couple of movies where there was one called Endgame, there was another River of Darkness, Above, which had quite a few wrestlers in fun in a kind of really cheesy way, including Psycho Sid or Sid Vicious.
Yeah, it's
really awkward in it, and I loved that. But Kurt Angle, who is always has great intensity and is always very charismatic in the wrestling ring, was very stiff and awkward in a lot of these movies, especially his small role in Dylan Dog. Like, it just came off as so awful.
I forgot he was in that.
Yeah. But it also reminds me, I know why, because this was around the time in the mid, he left WWE and he went to TNA, which was, it helped them out, and he did have some, especially the first year or two, some tremendous great matches. But one of the reasons he left WWE was he was addicted to, pills, I think Percocet especially. There was just that not thinking he had a problem, disagreements on how things were being handled. And I think around that time was when he was really getting into that very hard, especially because he was getting banged up as well. And that happens to so many wrestlers. You get addicted to Percocet.
Yeah.
So when I think about it, a lot of those times when he was getting some of those direct-to-video movies, it was around the really bad spots of his addiction. And I think that probably killed him, not just being in these movies, but also why he was so awkward. Because, I was blown away when I went to watch some of these movies, and I'm like, how is he this? Like, it was kind of almost the same way with Stone Cold. I'm like, how is he so stiff when I can't imagine, this guy who was charismatic and especially, would fit into these roles perfectly, and it's not working.
He even appears in Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies with Roddy Piper, let alone Witch Hunter and Pain and Gain. And I don't remember him in any of those.
I
So
kind of remember him Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies. I completely forgot he was in Pain and Gain, and I really enjoy Pain and Gain as well.
I do too. And
I remember he was in Warrior just because I remember I do
just playing
probably-
himself. Yeah.
Yeah, basically just playing himself, and it kind of worked also because they didn't really have to do much. But I remember also going, and that's a really great movie. That's
It really
kind
is.
of looked. But yeah, around that time. But it is like it's just so bizarre that that I did kind of at least want to mention him, like, because that's a guy I thought would have. And I'd be maybe kind of curious to see if he tried again, because it is funny, because he does look so much. It's so, like, you know what, though? I say that, but, like, even back in, like, before he went bald and kind of got, which is why I would say it looks like Joe Rogan. Now that I think about it, he even looked like Joe Rogan when he was, like, in the Olympics and that, 'cause they had that. Shit, it's not even a modern thing. He did always look like Joe Rogan, because now I'm thinking Joe Rogan in news radio looked just like Kurt Angle when he first started
That's what
out.
I just noticed. It's just
Because I was thinking, you said it, I was
be-
like, yeah, both of them modern look alike because they get beefier and like bald. And I'm like, no, they looked alike all the time. What the hell? Mind
Well,
blown.
I would not have been surprised if someone constantly got him mixed up with all the
Yeah.
Rogans, Lolo, and Bruce Willis, or even Randy Couture's of the world, because he just had that kind of look. And knowing
kind of
that he's
Wish Kurt would have either done some movies earlier in his career, or I would kind
he
of
still
like,
could.
yeah,
still
let
could.
him try again now. Like, as
Get
he has
Randall
cleaned,
Emmett
seemingly
or one of
he has
those
cleaned
things.
up his act a little bit more. Let him try again. Like, I actually think I want to see him get a second chance at that and see if maybe he can transition well to that.
Get him back in shape. And I know he's supposed to have a podcast out, but I don't want him to be like Rogan, where he's got a black belt and doesn't make use of it. I want him to actually, like, just sweep the leg.
At this point, who doesn't have what former wrestler or UFC fighter doesn't have a podcast? It seems like they're
It's
really
like
getting.
they're all getting worn out, and their mouth is mightier than their muscle. And I'm like, no, come on.
Which,
I
at the very least, I'm happy that they have something that they can retire into, but like that it's not like gonna give them the Randy the Ram Robinson stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, but you could still do like movies are a safer venture. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, Randy Savage is known for his trademark lines, as are Hogan, and The Rock's known for saying those lines in both the wrestling ring and the movies. Can Kurt or any of these other guys get some kind of awesome one-liner that we repeat just here and there? It's like, because like you say, I mean, there's a market for these guys. Someone will gladly pick up that movie at the video store or cast him in a
It's
martial
me.
art.
I would. I think you and I definitely would.
We totally would.
I did.
If he's in a international production with Michael J. White and Donnie Yen, everybody's fucking seeing it, especially if they're.
Yes.
I guess because right now he's kind of almost. He's a better known version of Tito Ortiz. You know what a big head Tito Ortiz has, where he's like, I'm becoming a big movie star. And it's like, nah, how's that going? And it's like, Kurt, you totally need, you've been in some good movies and you've been in some cheesy movies and then you've been in some really awful movies. It's like, you should totally just at least do an appearance. You don't have to do anything except be a bodyguard who just punches someone in the face one time, something.
Exactly.
I just want just a better resume instead of a bunch of appearances on a sitcom. Come on.
And it was funny, just to go back, that you did bring up Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, because I did forget to bring that up when I talked about Piper, because that's a movie that is very rough, and it's not as fun as it could be. Probably a lot for budget constraints, but
Yeah.
that is also another proof as to why Piper would be my number one. Is he's good in that movie. Like, he's the only time that he kind of gets some like introspect. He actually handles the introspection, like some of the drama, kind of like almost too well for that movie, because not just because it's Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, because like it's clear that that movie doesn't need it. I don't even know if that was the direction they wanted his character to go in. He's like, look, I'm doing this. But like, even then I was just like, yeah, man, he had that like kind of range to make that work. But yeah, I kind of like, once you mention it, I kind of do remember Kurt Angle in that movie, because I know for a fact he probably German suplex somebody in it, a zombie. But the only wrestlers
Right.
that really stood out to me in that movie that I could still remember were obviously Roddy Piper, Shane Douglas, because he had such a big role, and was he was playing himself. Everybody was. Matt Hardy, I remember, because I was also around the time I think he started doing his broken gimmick. And I also remember Hacksaw Jim Duggan, because I thought it was so endearing, him like building up to hit him one of them with the 2x4 and that. I was like, oh.
Right. It just
but I kind of did forget Kurt Angle until you mentioned, like, oh yeah, he was in that movie. Kevin Nash was in that. I wanted him to big boot and jackknife someone, but I do not remember him being in that unless somebody tells me he was. But there's no way I would have forgotten Kevin Nash was in that movie. So,
right. I mean, it was interesting too how he appeared in so many other just wacky movies, and he did kind of have a Seagal, Van Damme or Dolph kind of likability, where everyone was going to check out his movie regardless of whether they wanted to make sure if it had gone to, a theater or not. They didn't care. Just like, oh, Roddy, yeah, you got my money. I mean, because like you say, he was big on TV at the time, and he was big in a few cult movies. I mean, even Hell Comes to Frogtown was becoming a drive-in gym because people were just...
Oh, man, I love that movie. I think, again, it's another one that...
It's wacky.
It knows what it is, and it has fun with it. And it is funny because I remember, I don't know if he was just doing it for the character or if Piper legitimately just doesn't like the movie because it's, Hell Comes to Frogtown. But I remember when he came back to the WWF briefly in the early to mid 90s, and he was doing a feud with Jerry Lawler. And I think Lawler probably made fun of him for that too. But I remember there's this like weird backstage promo that Piper was doing, and he goes, yeah, I had this kid come up to me and just says he loved me in Hell Comes to Frogtown. I'm like, are you kidding me, kid? And I'm like, oh man, that kid was probably me actually. But I'm like, don't knock Hell Comes to Frogtown. That one's fun. I still need to see the sequel, Robert Zadar, Return to Frogtown, but I still haven't pulled the trigger on that one yet because you that's another guy just to go on a tangent. You put Robert Zadar in a movie, I'm watching it. So.
Oh yeah, Robert Zadar is too awesome. Well, and it's even interesting how he didn't do too many TV spots so much as just kind of appear more on just more independent movies. I mean, I don't know if you ever remember The Bad Pack or Honor. those were rather reasonable.
Bad Pack, I do. Honor, I don't think I did actually see. So,
2006, but yeah.
But I do remember Bad Pack, yes.
Hard Time with Burt Reynolds.
I do. That was pretty solid, actually, too.
Yeah.
One.
Sci-Fi is the only one I haven't seen. I hear it's junky, but I mean, I think it's got Billy Drago, so I got to see it.
That's another one I haven't seen. Jungle Ground's another one that's really fun. And
Jungle Ground was a lot of fun.
Jungle Ground's really good, and I got a rep for that one because that one kind of got lost in the shuffle from that mid-90s.
Yeah, VHS is drying up. It's becoming big.
And I haven't actually seen it yet, surprisingly, but I've also heard he's kind of fun in Terminal Rush because he's really chewing the scenery in that one.
He really is, against Don the Dragon Wilson.
Yes. It's really surprising I haven't seen that one yet, considering the cast.
I haven't either, I don't think. If I did, it was a while back, and I apparently remember anything. I think it was on Netflix, and it was at 2 a.m, and I was just going through.
I remember that's how I seen Hard Time, because that's kind of why I loved when Amazon started picking those movies up. That was kind of the glory days of like early Netflix streaming. Yeah, they'd have some big titles, but like as somebody who loved and was using Netflix to get the discs to movies like Hell Comes to Frogtown or Jungle Ground, I was like, oh, you're just going to throw them up on your streaming service and everybody's going to be like, who's going to watch that? I'm like, I am. This is awesome. Because that's how I remember seeing Hard Time. Because I was like, yeah, I'll watch the movie with him. And there was another one that he did. It had a generic title, but he did it with
Last to Surrender. I thought was fun.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Just like the buddy movies he did.
No Contest was the one that he did with Andrew Dice Clay and Robert Davi, who I love, who I think is really charismatic. That one was kind of
He's also within the Bad Pack, so there you go. There's that.
Yes, that's why. And right when you said that, I kind of briefly forgot about that. Andrew Dice Clay is another one that I always kind of like.
Jack of Hearts, he's in. Yeah, there you go.
I haven't seen, but yeah. But yeah, I always loved that very short period of when like Andrew Dice Clay was getting into movies. Like Ford Phelan was like the big promoted one, but then like Brain Smasher and then like No Contest ended up just kind of going direct to video. But like he had a charm to him that I remember, kind of enjoying.
He's doing action movies, the comedian. Yeah. He's doing it. It's a thing.
All right, so I think we got number 10. Because
I didn't realize Roddy was also on It's Always Sunny. That's wild.
Yes. Oh my God, that was a tremendous episode where he I
think I saw the Robot Chicken episode he was in.
Yes. So the It's Always Sunny is actually one of the best episodes of that series too, because it's one of the wrestling episodes, or Frank, and then Roddy Piper is just playing this whacked out, like really obscene version of Randy the Ram Robinson, and it's just so bizarre because it's almost like sometimes he's playing it dry, almost like a weird Tim and Eric, but it's so funny and amazing. Oh, if you haven't, you've got to see it. Like, it's so.
I will. Anytime my brother's in town, that often gets put on. Watch about 5 of those episodes, so I mean, I'm sure I'll eventually get to it.
The Maniac loves you. You're gonna love the Maniac.
God.
Well, Kurt Angle was my dishonorable mention, but my actual number 10 is someone.
Kurt, we love you, buddy, but you need to pick up the pieces here.
Yes. But my actual number 10 is when you said you were doing 8 and 9 together and you said The Rock, I actually thought you were going to do this as number 9 because he is so closely tied to him. Honestly, John Cena. He has surprised me.
Yes, a long way after doing stupid comedies. He is really surprising me. He even gets some of the best lines in Bumblebee.
Oh, yes. Like, he's pretty solid in Bumblebee. And honestly, like, in movies like Trainwreck, and even though I actually have yet to see it, but even like...
Sisters, you'll love it, man.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but Sisters, it's like...
As the drug dealer of the house, who's like a bodyguard, who's like, what are you doing?
And it's just... And honestly, his SNL stuff, I thought was actually really good. Like, I thought he was one of the better hosts they've had in a while.
Such a change, too. It's like he got these lesser wrestling gigs to start out, and yet people still is like, okay, he can do more than just reality shows and other stuff. He's a very funny guy, and I think the Psych appearance definitely helped because he plays that not only in a key episode but also in the first movie they did together.
Yes. And what I think has helped is he's embraced it a little bit more, because the first 2 movies that he got to do was when WWE was starting to kind of embrace doing, like, WWE Studios was the Marine in 12 Rounds. And I have a soft spot for the Marine because it's just a remake basically of Commando. But like, you can tell that even though he was very comfortable in the ring at that point and finding himself, between that and especially 12 Rounds, which was a little disappointing, especially coming from Rennie Harlan, but the concept, but like, he was kind of stiff, but you can kind of tell his heart wasn't into it yet. And he had always had that, like, somewhat real but somewhat played up but resentment to The Rock for just, well, you left and went Hollywood and then you come back occasionally. Whatever. I'm not going to do that. And yes, the joke is, well, now you've kind of just done that. You went to Hollywood and left, but now that his heart's in it, and I think just getting to do some of those roles in Psych and also embracing his, leader of WWE, poster boy, once he's like, okay, I'm, taking this for real, like, dude's good. Like, I'm so looking forward to him in the Suicide Squad and as well as that series. I think he has done comedy tremendously. And even though there's not too much, like, as much that I can go off of just yet, I'm willing to put him at 10 because of how quickly he's impressed me, especially coming off, like, how, I wouldn't say awkward, or even stiff, but how I didn't think he transitioned so well in his first 2 roles. So I was like, hey, maybe he just won't be someone that will transition well to this. But no, he has. And like Trainwreck especially, like, he stole the show in that, and for like to have, like, there's so much bravery in comedy too to make fun of yourself, and he's not somebody that's ever, like, seemingly afraid to do that. But like, that's how I think kind of him and The Rock really worked well, is like, yeah, they'll play the fool, but they'll make it work. And like, you've got to be able to do that and not do the Vin Diesel thing where you start to take yourself too seriously sometimes.
Even having, Playing with Fire, I hear, is rather wacky. He's even plays himself against The Rock and Fighting with My Family, but I hear he's also in 64th Man and Audible.
Yes, and I've heard really good things about that. So like, I'm like legit excited to see what Cena's doing. And even that Ferdinand movie, it was fine, but like, he took well to voice acting, which is not...
I hear The Wall is great. Did you ever see that one?
That's one I have not, and I remember wanting to because it looked
Sniper
good.
Under Fire.
Hearing he was actually really solid. And it was one that I think... It was just one of those ones, and you probably have this too, where you're about to watch it, it kind of falls through the cracks, and then it's not until years later. Now that you brought it up, maybe I'll probably try to remember to watch it.
I've been meaning to. I've heard nothing but good stuff, and after seeing a really bad recent movie from Doug Liman that had production issues, I'm like, okay, well, this has to be good.
Let's cleanse the palate.
Watch all the resume to say you are the legit true fan.
All right. Was there any other maybe honorable mentions that
I do? Most of it would probably be just kind of sarcastic. There's definitely plenty of them out there. I'm willing to. despite suffering from him, I know I kind of gave him a bitch slap earlier, but I am willing to actually check out any of Randy Couture's any additional movies. I guess you could lean this in between an honorable and dishonorable mention, because I really actually dug Hijack because he just did the minimum of what he had to do without even though he kind of played it safe there in that fun, Passenger 57 Die Hard knockoff. But he was really good as the crooked cop in that one Dolph Lundgren movie, Blood Rush or something. It was under a different name. That's a far more generic name, but the movie itself, just the problem is that the main fight scene that the movie builds up to has all this other clutter that has nothing to do with the main, heist and crooked cop formula. And you see him and Dolph Lundgren working out. You can find YouTube video of this, of them prepping for the fights in this movie, staging it. And you see the final movie, and it's literally one and done. It looks like it was done in one take. I'm like, oh, how dare you fuckers do this to me? And I think despite having a few other Asylum things, I think he's another guy. He doesn't really, like you say, we don't know what he wants to do. But I think hopefully, after seeing him make fun of himself on a recent episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway, let alone the Range 15 zombie movie, I will hope that he at least gets to star in a better, at least Red or Now You See Me type movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I guess dishonorable mention for now.
For now, maybe he could, kind of like my Kurt Angle dishonorable mention. I want you to redeem yourself. I'm saying it because I'm disappointed that
even Kurt Angle is more relevant than Randy
Well,
Couture.
that is true. It's saying something at this point.
That's sad, though.
Yeah. That is very sad. Though we are going to also branch into MMA, and I know this guy probably isn't because he's shot himself in the foot so many times and sounds like a piece of shit human being, but I remember really liking Rampage Jackson in the A-Team movie.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking, like, this guy's got such charisma and charm that he could easily be doing, like, these kind of, like, action-type movies, and it just never really seemed to materialize. And I think it probably just came because, you've heard enough about the guy. So that's another one that I guess would be a dishonorable mention in that vein of, like, but it's only dishonorable because you were so good. In this case, it's dishonorable because you were so good in something and it just never got followed up on.
Yeah, he has minor roles in movies like Fire with Fire, and like you say, he was perfect at, you either like or don't like that A-Team movie, but he did kind of really echo that that vibe of looking like Mr. T. I thought he was all right in Boone the Bounty Hunter against other dishonorable mention John Hennington.
Yeah. Oh my God. Right when you said it, I'm like, why is that name? Yes, John Hennigan. Oh, we got to talk about him in a sec. I'm glad you brought it up.
It's all good.
One movie that we had to talk about very briefly. Well, two, I guess, but
yeah, Rampage. I thought was really good in Cops and Robbers, as well as Vigilante Diaries, where he got to play opposite, Michael Madsen, Michael J. White, and Paul Sloan. Just an awesome B-movie cast. And like you say, we're waiting on that role that will really just kind of really knock it hard, and that will just make him way more relevant and just in way more movies. Because I think that's just it too. I think they have such a bad rep that no one wants to rep them, and at the same time, if you just had a Ray Donovan kind of guy cleaning up their mess, you could probably have them in more movies. And at the same time, it's just like, pretty much like Hennington, who was in Birds of Prey. He was in Boss Level recently, but it's a minor role. So, he's on his way, I think, but he got set back by just personal problems and, he said, she said, wife beating, and I guess he had a bigger head too, and just a crappy rep. So,
yeah, and it's something that is different circumstances, but I'm like, I wonder if that's going to happen now to Gina Carano with all of the controversy. And she was, and if I'm just saying it lightly,
oh really?
Just saying controversy is to say it lightly, but even just like I kind of see that as like somebody that was finally kind of gaining her steam. And now I think it's probably going to go down that same Rampage role. A dishonorable mention.
He's not even political. He's just
It's just that's such a different this Gina was definitely the political craziness. For Rampage, everything just comes from her personality and personal life.
Everybody, I'll beat your ass. Yeah.
But and then if we are gonna do another dishonorable mention, just to talk about Ronda Rousey, really just didn't move into movies well at all. She's just
she has like one or two okay lines in Expendables 3, but
yeah,
the start of that scene is Banderas and Colin Lutz kicking ass with the motorcycle, and it's just like, yeah, no, I'm just not digging it. It's just Gina had that fierce Cynthia Rothrock kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I already knew she was kind of loony in the head, just stuff, some other just trash talk. I'm sure Randy Couture probably is wacky, not safe for word gym talk, and we just haven't heard it because it's not on tape. So.
As somebody who's grown up a big wrestling fan, I've learned that a lot of times the people that I grew up loving, not all of them, sometimes you get surprised, but a lot of them, are going to be the same with some of these, where they're just going to have some like loony theories or whatever, and it's just how far are they going to go and bring it out that's going to ruin that reputation, obviously, but also I just got to separate the art from the artist in that respect, because you know.
I mean, Hulk Hogan was caught saying the N-word in the sex tape, so it's like, I'm sure many of these guys, I mean, they don't mean really, some of them don't mean anything by it, and others, they just can't help it. They know that there's all this manliness and other assholes, and some of their it doesn't help that some of their fans are also incels or insensitive dicks.
Yeah.
So it's like, they're gonna have the whole I ain't gay motherfucker, and this shit going on, and it's like impossible to do damage control. So I will pray that any of these guys can help out. I mean, Rousey, she had barely a role in Mile 22, and then she's on 911 show, but she's a supporting role. So it's just like, what is going to convince us to actually give her a second chance?
Yeah, I know. And like, was it the 6th or the 7th Fast and the Furious? But they at least, 7. But they at least utilized her well. Like, we're not going to really make a chalk. We'll just give her a fight scene. But like, if you're going to start wanting to actually market her in those kind of roles, like, and
all I know
some
is she's
of it
a
I think
fan
has
of Pokemon. That's all I know.
You like Pokemon and like Dragon Ball Z stuff. There you go. Put her in let her voice a character in one of these Dragon Ball Z.
That would actually be funny, but
I would actually like to see that. But I also wonder if and it's not, maybe she is trying, and sometimes it just doesn't always work out, but like, you can tell that Gina Carano was putting in the work. But also, you know what? Carano got to work with Soderbergh on Haywire, which is a solid
Haywire and plenty of other. I was able to come up with a top 10 list for her at least.
So maybe Rousey would also need to work with some other directors that would be able to better utilize her, or at least give her some of that where she can get some experience. But before I forget, I did want to circle back to John Hennigan. Obviously, I could bring up we could bring up Russell Madness where he wrestles the dog, and it's very funny and cute. But that's not the movie I want to bring up. Or Dave Made a Maze, which is a very clever movie and he has a funny role in. No. A movie that I don't even know if many people have seen, but I watched a couple of years ago. It was a generic slasher called Minutes to Midnight. It also had Bill Moseley, I want to say, in it. Just kind of your backwoods slasher. But what is so great about John Hennigan in this movie is his character's name, and I have pulled up his character's name here. It's Travis Krenna. And I blank on the character's name now, but he says, I want to say, a handful of times to the point where you can have a drinking game and get alcohol poisoning from. He has to constantly, he's like a hitchhiker looking for his lost brother. So he is constantly appearing randomly to characters until he finally gets to our lead characters, just asking, hi, I'm Travis Krenna. Have you seen my brother? I'm going to say John or something. And like, I was watching him with friends and we were just laughing so hard because he was fine. Like, he's doing what he has to do. But like, It's like, did they know that this was a joke after a while? Because this guy just coming up saying, hi, I'm Travis Krenna, just the way, like, I can't do it justice by saying it. Like, if somebody has a supercut out there, or it's honestly not that bad of a movie. Like, if you like slashers, it's fun enough for what it was. Bill Moseley's kind of fun.
It was pretty wild.
But oh my god, just like, I don't know whose idea that was, but yeah, it was
Sol and Ray.
And like, right when you said Boone, and I was like, why Boone? Why is that name from? I'm like, oh my god, that was the John Hennigan movie. And I'm like, yeah, Hennigan's somebody that I don't really always think of as being in movies. Or you know what? Another one that I wish would have stuck more because I believe she was also in Boone. If not, I know she was in something with John Hennigan. I always kind of wish Trish Stratus would have landed more, but
I was gonna mention her too. I'm glad you reminded me. Yeah, because she's in Gridlocked and 2011's Bounty Hunters, but she needs to be in more. And I think she also had a sex tape scandal, and I think a bunch of other stuff. And it's like, well, she's cute, and you would never know she was a wrestler. Not to be mean to wrestlers, but you would just never know. Even before that, she just had some kind of natural appeal, and it's like she should be doing something more than whatever diva.
yeah. Or she
or Bella
apparently
Show.
was in that Fox News Christmas in the Rockies movie. The only reason I know that
Oh no!
was because the Cinema Snob reviewed it, and like, what was even funnier was like, and I wasn't sure at first because I know sometimes he'll mention, but I don't know how familiar he is with wrestling. But what was funny because the week before he had reviewed the Wrestling Christmas Miracle movie, which was like a amateur wrestling movie, but it barely had any wrestling in it. And he goes, so wait a minute, how does the Fox News movie have the wrestler in it and not the previous movie that was about wrestling that I just watched? But like, I was like, oh, like, I guess she's in that, and she was just playing like somebody's like wife or something. But like, yeah, because I remember kind of like it. I actually remember kind of liking Bounty Hunters. It kind of reminded me of something like an 80s Sedaris movie, and I thought she was all right in it. And she just didn't. I thought like she was going to start appearing in a bunch of stuff, and then it just never materialized.
No way. Yeah. Here's to hoping.
Yes, if you're listening, Trish Stratus, do more movies.
Please.
Do more action movies. Don't
do just any movies.
Don't do more Fox News Christmas movies or go into the Lifetime. I mean, if you want to do some of those too, fine. Definitely get paid. But do some action movies, please.
Oh my God! I just realized John Hennigan was also in The Last Ship. I didn't even realize.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
in the second to last season, it's very Odyssey themed, and I mean they're very bluntly referencing it. It's very wild, and I thought Never Leave Alone and Boom were decent, but I mean, I have yet to see Dave Made of Maze. I'm sure I'll check it out. But yeah,
that one is actually very creative and funny, and he has a very quick, small role in it, and it's very funny. I completely forgot. Oh my God, he was. I just decided to pull him up. He did. I mean, granted, it's a nothing role, but he was. John Hennigan was actually in Birds of Prey. He's one of the Lord's Gang members. Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I know when I watched it, now I think about it, I was like, oh shit, that's John Hennigan or John Morrison. Now he's back in, and now that he's back in WWE, I wonder if because they sometimes get a little bit of lock down, but hopefully he can still, because I give him credit.
He has a new movie that came out this year that I haven't seen yet that looks like a Tarantino Hollywood producer cover-up movie. So,
oh, is that the Chronicles of? No, that's what is the Chronicles of Rickroll? Oh my God,
Rickroll. That would be funny.
Oh God,
it's called Bullet Ride. And,
okay, I see it now. Yeah, I'm looking here. Okay, I'm interested about that one.
A Wishmaster horror movie type called 27 thing. The only thing I've seen him in that I didn't like was Street, which was just a very bland fight to the death kind of movie with barely any fighting, but he is one of the crooked officers in American Justice, also with Tommy Tiny Lister. So there you go.
Yes. Yeah, I will give this. Oh, he also was in that I believe it was the Asylum version of Hercules.
Yes, that's where I mainly first saw him. I knew him.
Oh God, that's great. Oh man, I want to give him credit though. Once he kind of left WWE, went into the independents, and was making a name for himself all over Mexico and that. Give him credit. He really started doing a lot of movies at that time. He good for him. Like, I always thought like he was somebody that which makes sense. He has a good look for it, but it always kind of took me by surprise. Like when he just started popping up in a bunch of these, and they were even letting him kind of get top billing, and I was like, good for him. I'm kind of glad that actually worked out.
I was too, because I mean, it's already so much energy, endless energy, just trying to make this happen, and it's just like, yeah, if you can make it work, and don't let anyone get in your way, and keep finding ways to be relevant instead of just going with whatever. Because I mean, like you say, I mean, all these guys I think can do something cool in the future. It's when it just seems endless that's where you just get to just wondering, okay. Yeah, no, I think we've named a lot of the best ones that.
I was gonna say the only other person that I would give, and he only popped up in a few things, but I guess a quick mention would be Terry Funk as well. Obviously Roadhouse, but there was also there's two things that I love where he has such a goofy personality to him, and they made it work at these. Is there's a short-lived TV series to go back to Cinema Snob, Tequila and Bonetti, and it was one of those early '90s where it's like we want to be Turner and Hooch, and he plays like a cop. And I just remember there was this episode where he's like disappointed that he found out RoboCop wasn't real, and there was something both funny but also kind of like, oh, you wanted to give the guy a hug, and then there's this.
Oh yeah, Roddy Piper was on the RoboCop show too.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, he was also on that too. Oh God. I forgot about that. He was also chewing the scenery in that one. And then there is, and I almost was it Fred Olin Ray or was it Donald G. Jackson? It seems more like a Donald G. Jackson movie. But that Terry Funk appeared in called Mom Can I Keep Her, which had
It probably is.
I forget the guy's last name, but the first name was Justin, but he was Reese in Malcolm in the Middle, so it was like right before that. And it's just one of those cheesy 90s kids movies where it's like, oh, Reese finds this gorilla that was being abused, but of course the person that was abusing him in the circus was none other than Terry Funk. And there's this scene that is so unintentionally hilarious where it's supposed to be heart-wrenching, like the sad scene where he gets the monkey in the ape suit back and he's whipping it with a belt, but the way he's just like yelling it, it's like, oh, you stupid ape, and it's just holy shit, it's hilarious and I love it. And like, so there's a part of me, he only did a little bit, but like I always kind of like it whenever Terry Funk would pop up because it's just so distinctly Terry Funk. So he's probably the last one that I would probably, because I think we, like you said, I think we covered most of them, even if we just briefly mentioned, hey, Rob Van Dam was in a movie called Inside Town or something like that.
Right, and like you say, some of these guys are just. I mean, Terry Funk at least even got to do stunts for Rambo Freddy and appeared over the top. So, I mean, like you say, a lot of these guys, we've seen these movies, so the nostalgia has grown on us. He is also in another Olin Ray movie called Active Stealth.
Yeah, so it was Olin Ray, yes. Because I remember he did a couple of them with him. But like around that time, Fred Olin Ray.
Because Olin Ray was also a wrestler. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And well, those two also would just trade back and forth, him and Jackson, between cheesy action movie and then really bizarre kids movies in the 90s. Yeah. That it's just like, I'm surprised they didn't just join forces. And then you do also have the likes of, Ox Baker popping up in Escape from New York, or, cameos from the Freebirds and Highlander. And I guess real quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention, because I'm sure this will probably eventually finally get a release, and Ox Baker reminded me. I've only seen clips of this, and I will not say how I've seen clips of it, but there was a batshit insane movie in 1985 by the name of Blood Circus, also sometimes Blood Circus Wrestling, which is this really weird science fiction horror movie about intergalactic, like aliens coming and wanting to stage professional wrestling, and they would film it at some of the wrestling scenes in Baltimore, but it was completely funded from the credit card authorization business. So basically on Santo Gold. So there's a character in the movie called Santo, which is more for that than the obvious El Santo reference that you would think of it. And I could say from the few clips that I have seen of the movie from like the beginning of it, it is incredibly rough. And I know some of the reasons it just never really surfaced was just
not well made.
They didn't have much of a budget, and the director was clearly insane, and he was trying to market it, but also the 35 millimeter negatives were thought to be lost, but they have been found. So apparently I think some boutique label is finally going to put it out. But from what I have seen, and some of the rumors as to why it never really ended up getting released is because it is so fucking awful and like so out there that I think this was right around, this is 1985, so Hulk Hogan and all that was really hitting. So, you had your Body Slam with Roddy Piper and that. So you had all these organizations wanting to get in. So when you have these wrestling promotions, the lesser ones trying to work in with this, they're like, oh, we don't actually want the wrestling out of Baltimore Civic Center to be in Southwest Championship Wrestling to actually be associated with this weird sci-fi comedy horror that just does not stick at all. But I wanted to at least bring that up because I'm sure that will probably surface someday, and I will see it. But like that was one where
Shout Factory Blu-ray.
Well, it was one that, or Vinegar Syndrome, I could easily see picking this one up. It was one that, like, on rare occasions, it would somehow like surface on YouTube. Like, I don't know how the copy like was put there, but I think the person who directed it actually just took it down. And I think there might be some clips on YouTube now because If you look
Blood
at some,
Circus. Okay.
if some of the infomercials for Santo Gold around the time did have clips from the movie, and I think you can still see the trailer, but it is just this really weird, ambitious, but like also one of those things like you can't. It's almost like a weird Neil Breen or Tommy Wiseau dream,
Yes.
where Neil Breen probably even more, where it's just like you can't fake this. Somebody just has to be crazy enough and weird, but definitely a visionary to want this to work.
It was shown for only like a week in like
Yeah.
rented Baltimore theaters. Jesus.
And he would do the screen bags which he provided to moviegoers, which is just a nice love letter to your William Castle era movies. But like, oh my God, what was it? The bags had a long poem about Blood Circus on each side, as well as a coupon for a free diamond ring from Rigattuso's Santo Gold infomercials.
There's a 87 creation for it years later. So yeah, there you go. It's just like one of those, it's a lost movie. And by that, because of the talent attached to it, it has that just, that nostalgia aside, just that must see by whatever means necessary.
But I can warn you all from the few clips that I have seen, it is definitely going to be one for the brave. Like, you have to really want to endure some
You have to
painful cinema.
love bad movies. Yeah.
Because I know just from the few clips that I was able to see, even I was like, oh, this is going to be a long 80 minutes once this finally gets released and I can sit through this.
Looking at IMDb, there's like only a few reviews for this, and they're people who were the projectionists
Yes.
at the theater, so that's how they saw it.
So I had to at least end with that, because that's a whole different kind of mention. I just remember that Ox Baker is one of the few wrestlers that does apparently pop up in that. So
Santa Gold. That's great. Oh man, and stuff like this is kind of part of the fun. It just comes back into movies because. But fortunately, hopefully, we've named some people that most people are going to find very appealing and interesting.
yes.
And I mean, it helps that Ox Baker was also one of the main wrestler in Escape from New York. So there you go.
Yes. Very good. And I actually got to meet him at a convention. Very funny guy. And he did have like promotional stills from Escape from New York. And one of my friends actually got to wax his mustache. And it's one of the coolest things
Oh
that I've
my
ever got
God.
to witness live.
That's wild. Oh man. So, what would you like to promote for your podcast? Is it? You
Well,
said it's kind of on hiatus right now. Or?
yeah, so it's been on hiatus for a little bit just as I'm back kind of in school as well. So I kind of just took a break. I am thinking, since school should hopefully be wrapping up. Right now I'm on a break, but should be wrapping up hopefully by the end of this year. I could hopefully see, maybe in the time being, resurrecting or reopening Suplex Multiplex. Maybe I'll wait until all the regular theaters open and I can just say it was closed for COVID.
Yeah, and feel free to even share it in the group. You got the links. I'll show it to you again.
Definitely.
I mean, stuff like that is just always fun, regardless of how big a fan you are.
Yes, and it's all the madness that is professional wrestling in film, whether it's taken seriously like The Wrestler, or if it's the corniness of your no holds barred, and I will include, to go back to Kevin Nash, there was, I forget what I paired it with, probably another movie that maybe Leslie Nielsen was in, but there was some movie, I want to say it was Family Plan or something, really lousy, like TV kids movie. And I literally reviewed it for the show because Kevin Nash is in it for like 10 seconds as a guy that says like one line because he's running the jackhammer because he does the jackhammer, so we're gonna have this jackhammer. I'm like, look, folks, I will include any movie on this podcast, even if a wrestler is in the background for 5 seconds. I'm counting it.
Oh Jesus, that's great.
But I have not revisited ever since it came out, Leprechaun Origins, and I'm sure someday I will. But that may be the very last movie I do before I Multiplex down, because I don't know if I want to rewatch that one. But I will brave it again.
I'll rewatch it for you.
Yes, well, I'll bring you on once whenever I get the show back up and running. If I need,
whatever your existing notes are left over, you can go on while I bring up how the pretty much monotone review I had of it the first time. I don't hate it, but it's still pretty stupid.
I remember the only thing I can remember, not even I guess liking about it, but remember was the brother from Freddy vs. Jason that played that Freddy pretended to be in the bathtub. I always remember kind of liking him, and he's like in it. I was just like, oh shit, I haven't seen him in a while. So I was like, well, at least Leprechaun Origins was given that guy. So I guess maybe it wasn't a complete waste of time because it gave that guy a good job. So
Yeah.
for me, it was a waste of time.
Wasn't he the same guy who was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, or is that a different guy from like Jackass or something?
No, I think that was. Don't
Okay.
quote me on that, but I think you might be right.
I gotta really like it. Okay, well, thank you for jumping on here. This
Yeah,
was
thanks for
really
having me.
stellar.
It was fun. It's been a while since I got to do some podcasting, so this scratched that itch. I'm really glad we could finally get this
Scratch
working.
No itching, no inflammation. We got it done, and it was great.
Hey, man, you have a great night.
Likewise.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time.
Ah,
Tangents galore.
yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Ah, yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah,
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
ah, ah,
all
ah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
No, don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we're going to end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of here.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenoff.
Hi, everybody. It's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything: pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VD Clinic Pod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VD Clinic Pod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.